Chapter 449. Xiao Yichen ignored his last sentence. He tried his best to hold on to the safety lever and leaned his body forward slightly to ensure that Yun Tianyu could grab hold of his arm with both hands. Their actions caused the security personnel below to exclaim in alarm. They were all professionally trained security personnel and were well aware of the limits of the human body. They knew that such an action was extremely dangerous for Xiao Yichen. Yun Xianxia watched on with trepidation. Her heart was beating faster and faster. She was constantly in agony. Yun Tianyu quickly grabbed hold of Xiao Yichen's arm. Although his grip was not as strong as Xiao Yichen's, in this extremely dangerous situation, a person's instinctive will to survive came into play. He gritted his teeth, grabbed hold of Xiao Yichen's arm and said, "I've got a firm grip." "Are you sure?" Xiao Yichen was clearly worried that his grip was not strong enough. If he let go, you would fall. "Go grab that safety belt." "Okay. Be careful. You must tell me if you can't hold on." With that, Xiao Yichen reached for the safety belt. He failed to grab hold of it after several attempts. However, he was not discouraged. He was racing against time, knowing that every second was a great test for Yun Tianyu. Finally, after much effort, he managed to grab hold of the safety belt. After wrapping the safety belt around his wrist a few times and holding it tightly, Xiao Yichen turned his head and said, "I've got it. Now I'll pull you up. You must hold on to my arm." But Yun Tianyu was silent for half a second before he vowed, "I know you can do it. I believe in you." But Xiao Yichen smiled and began to pull him up with all his might. Gritting his teeth, he exerted the last bit of strength in his body and, with a low growl, dragged the boy into the car in an instant. As he pulled Yun Tianyu up, his elbow was dislocated with a crack. Yun Tianyu's left wrist was also dislocated because he exerted too much force. The two little lads rolled into the car. Yun Tianyu quickly grabbed hold of the other safety belt and put it on his shoulder to stabilize his center of gravity. Below them, a series of cheers could be heard. Yun Xianxia was stunned for a long time. Her eyes widened in disbelief. The two little guys actually saved themselves. Oh God, this is a miracle. Only when the car door was closed and locked by Xiao Yichen did she believe that a miracle had truly happened. In her agitation, tears fell like rain. Her body, due to the momentary relaxation after excessive tension, she was limp. She half knelt on. Until now, her heartbeat was still unable to calm, as dislocated, too. For a moment, his heart was filled with mixed feelings. However, he seemed to be able to tolerate pain. Even though his wrist was dislocated and deformed, his face remained as calm as still water. Instead, he was more concerned about Yun Tianyu's arm. "How's your wrist?" "I think it's dislocated." Yun Tianyu could not tolerate pain, but he was strong enough to endure it. Even though he was drenched in cold sweat, he did not cry out in pain. After a moment of silence, he was still worried about Xiao Yichen's injury. Chapter 450. "Are you okay?" he asked softly and carefully. His tone was no longer as cold and distant as before. Xiao Yichen was agitated by his change in attitude. Although he did not show it on his face, it was reflected in his trembling voice. "I'm fine." "Your elbow is dislocated. Does it hurt?" "It should be very painful." After persisting for so long, his nerves must be numb. Now, with a dislocated elbow, Xiao Yichen hurriedly consoled him. "Don't worry, I'm used to it. This is a common occurrence during training." A child's world was very simple. Perhaps, Yun Tianyu was previously hostile toward Xiao Yichen and Muyazha. He was afraid that these two would barge into his carefully guarded world and snatch away his mommy's love. However, a friend in need was a friend indeed. He was not heartless or cold-blooded. Moreover, they were connected by blood. Looking at Xiao Yichen's injured arm now, his heart ached more or less. Yun Tianyu gave Li Hanlin a call and asked him to start the Ferris wheel. Li Hanlin immediately picked up the walkie-talkie and asked the control panel to start the machine. The Ferris wheel slowly resumed operation. The two little lads sat facing each other. Both of them looked quite disheveled. Their hair was messy, their cheeks were wet with cold sweat, and their faces were flushed red. However, when they looked at each other, they seemed to have an innate understanding and smiled at each other. "You're better than I thought." Yun Tianyu pursed his lips and gave a rare compliment. It was very rare for him to praise someone. This time, however, it was from the bottom of his heart. If not for Xiao Yichen's strong physique, who had persisted for so long, he really did not know what would have been waiting for him. Xiao Yichen blushed shyly at this compliment. He opened his mouth a few times, but no words came out. He was obviously shy. The Ferris wheel slowly descended to the ground. The tourists poured out of the car like a tidal wave. The security personnel were in charge of guiding the crowd. When Yun Tianyu and Xiao Yichen came out holding each other's arms, Yun Shishir broke through the crowd and ran toward them. When Xiao Yichen saw Yun Shishir, his heart skipped a beat. Then he felt a surge of warmth. He had narrowly escaped death, and the first person he saw was this woman. Even though he still didn't know who this woman was or if she was his biological mother, he still felt that it was great. His heart felt very warm. To be honest, if this gentle woman in front of her was her mommy, how good would that be? He did not hold much affection for Mu Wanru. After all, he was not her biological child. Mu Wanru's love for him was only superficial. However, no matter how well she did it, the child could not feel any maternal love from her. Naturally, he would not be close to her. Like her very much. If this woman was his biological mother, then he would acknowledge her without hesitation. If she was his mommy, then it would be a very blissful thing. Xiao Yichen clenched his fists tightly. He was a little nervous. When Yu saw her, his originally calm face immediately changed to one of grievance and shock. He pouted his little mouth and his watery eyes were instantly filled with tears. "Mommy?" Her voice was so sweet that it scared Xiao Yichen. The latter's face was filled with horror and disbelief. It was even more frightening than when he was in imminent danger. Chapter 451. Why? He was calm and collected earlier, but why did his IQ seem to drop by 8 levels the moment he was in front of Yun Shishir? He was just like a childish child acting coquettishly in front of his mother. Was this an act? Xiao Yichen was dumbfounded. Yun Tianyu was agitated that Yun Shishir was safe and sound. On the one hand, he was whining to her so that Yun Shishir could comfort him. His skills were naturally top-notch, so tears streamed down his face instantly. Seeing this, Yun Shishir felt as if a knife was being twisted in her heart. It was about to shatter into pieces. She immediately half-knelt in front of him and carefully pulled him into her embrace. Her throat was choked with sobs. "You, my baby, don't cry, don't cry. Mommy is here, Mommy is here." Yun Shishir kept comforting him. Her heart was in so much pain that she forgot about Xiao Yichen, who was standing at the side. Yun Tianyu held his dislocated wrist and said delicately, "Mommy, my wrist is broken, it hurts?" His coquettish tone was the complete opposite of his cold and calm tone on the Ferris wheel. Xiao Yichen almost vomited blood. He could not tell at all. His younger brother was so good at acting spoiled. Yun Shishir looked at his dislocated wrist and felt her heart wrench. When she looked at Yun Tianyu's pale face, her tears flowed uncontrollably. Her heart was in so much pain that she wished that she could bear all the pain that Yun Tianyu was suffering. You're injured. It's Mommy's fault. Mommy didn't protect you well." Yun Shishir's heart was in so much pain that it felt as if a knife was being twisted in her heart. She kept apologizing to Yu, feeling that she had not fulfilled her responsibility to protect the child. She blamed herself endlessly, and her heart ached so much that her tears fell like rain. Xiao Yichen stood by the side and watched helplessly. His heart ached. He suddenly remembered that today was his birthday. It was supposed to be a happy birthday with his father, but the Song sisters came uninvited. Not only did they disturb the birthday atmosphere, but they also sowed discord and made his father angry with him. They even left him alone in the amusement park. Mu Yazhi knew that this was a punishment. However, after experiencing such a dangerous situation, Mu Yazhi's heart was filled with complaints and grievances. Suddenly, he was envious of Yun Tianyu. It was great to have a mother who doted on him so much. It wasn't just a little, but a lot of envy that seeped deep into his bones. He was so envious that he was a little jealous. He felt that Yun Shishir's body was like a warm sun. When he got closer, he felt warm. Xiao Yichen pursed his lips and greedily took a careful step toward Yun Shishir's direction. He got closer and closer. It was as if he would be satisfied just by standing a little closer to her. Yun Tianyu caught his little action from the corner of his eye. He lifted his head from Yun Shishir's embrace and looked at him. Following his gaze, Yun Shishir looked up as well. Yun Tianyu subtly shrunk his body and gave Yun Shishir half the space in her embrace. He hugged her shoulders and whispered into her ear, "Mommy, Big Brother saved me. His name is Muichen." Big Brother, although he did not call him Big Brother in front of Xiao Yichen, it was enough to prove that he acknowledged Xiao Yichen from the bottom of his heart. This meant that he acknowledged this Big Brother. Chapter 452. It was just that he had always been shy about expressing it. However, it was precisely because he approved of it that he gave up half of the space in Yun Shishir's arms. In the past, he had never liked any child sharing Yun Shishir's love with him. But now, he had thought it through. He shouldn't have been so selfish. This way of thinking was a little too childish. Mommy probably liked Xiao Yichen too, right? If he stood in the way, Mommy would definitely be sad. He would never do anything that would make Mommy sad. Yun Shishir looked at Xiao Yichen. At this moment, he was standing helplessly in front of her, holding his dislocated arm. He looked a little uneasy and uneasy. Her gaze fell on his deformed elbow joint, and her heart ached even more. She didn't know why he was in this amusement park, and she didn't know why he suddenly appeared to save them. Yes, she was saved by this child. He was only 6 years old, but he saved her and Yu in the nick of time. She was very grateful and touched by him, but more than that, she was flustered after surviving a disaster. However, she didn't dare to speak. If she was too proactive, she was afraid that she would scare the child or cause him to reject her. Thus, she asked carefully, "Xiao Yichen, are you okay?" Hearing her call his name, Xiao Yichen widened his eyes in shock. His eyelashes trembled slightly, and his lips couldn't help but tremble. He hadn't shed a single tear during that dangerous moment, but now his eyes were slightly moist. Her voice was so gentle, like a warm little spring that flowed into his heart. His body, which had turned cold from fear, suddenly warmed up. He didn't know how to respond to her and appeared a little clumsy. He wanted to tell her that he was fine and that he didn't want her to worry. But subconsciously, he wanted to tell her that his dislocated arm was actually very painful. The thrilling experience he had just experienced had left him in a state of shock. The fear in his heart had yet to dissipate, and he was hoping for her comfort and heartache. He had never been good with words, so he didn't know how to express his feelings. Yun Shishir was also very patient. She extended her palm to him and slowly opened it. "Come, let me have a look, okay?" He looked at Yun Shishir's outstretched hand. It was as white as jade, and her fingers were long and slender. They were warm and soft. It was especially beautiful. She thought of Mu Wanru's hands. They were bony with thin joints and looked like 5 sharp knives. On the other hand, Yun Shishir's hands were beautiful. Xiao Yichen nodded timidly. He took a step closer to Yun Shishir and tried to look at her face. However, he saw that she was looking at him gently, patiently, and warmly. Xiao Yichen's heart seemed to be touched by this smile. The mother and son seemed to have a telepathic connection as they walked towards her. Yun Shishir carefully put her arm around his shoulders, and Xiao Yichen took the opportunity to lean into her embrace. However, he carefully hid his hands behind his back. He didn't want her to worry. Yun Shishir's sharp eyes caught this small movement of his. Sometimes, although these two children didn't grow up together, they would often do the same thing. In the past, Yi was also afraid that she would be worried and upset, so he didn't tell her about certain things. "Your hand is injured? Let me have a look." She couldn't hide the worry on her face, and the heartache in her eyes was almost visible. Chapter 453. Xiao Yichen shook his head. He was clearly the one who was injured, yet he was the one comforting her. "It's all right, it doesn't hurt." "How can it not hurt? Let me see." Yun Shishir could not help but let go of his hand. She carefully lifted his arm and, as expected, his elbow was dislocated and deformed. Her heart ached so much that her fingertips trembled uncontrollably. With a lump in her throat, she said sadly, "It must be very painful." The thought of the earlier scene made his heart palpitate. The Ferris wheel had stopped, and Yun Tianyou's entire body was hanging outside the carriage. If not for little Ichen's tight grip on his arm, the two lads would most likely have met with misfortune. It was so high up, dozens of meters. It was as high as a 20-story building. What if they fell? They would definitely be smashed to pieces. She had almost lost her two children. At that critical moment, she could not do anything and could only watch helplessly as her imagination ran wild. Yun Xianxia still felt a lingering fear at the thought of that tragic scene. "Thank you for saving Yu. Thank you." Yun Xianxia was extremely grateful to this child. Her heart ached so much that tears fell from her eyes as she hugged the two disheveled children. Her heartache seemed to have infected Xiao Yichen as well. He opened his mouth and tried several times to call out that warm and unfamiliar word, but in the end he only managed to utter a few vague syllables. Inside, he kept repeating, "Mommy? Mommy." It was very strange. The woman before him was clearly a stranger, yet it was so magical that there was a special bond between mother and son. Even though he had not been with her for the past 6 years, he still could not help but feel an inexplicable closeness toward her. She could give him warmth that Mu Wanru could not. However, what he knew all this while restrained him, so he could not easily call out those two words. Even so, he still yearned for this warmth from deep in his heart. The ambulance arrived in no time. Xiao Yichen and Yu were carefully placed on stretchers and carried into the ambulance. Yun Xianxia followed closely behind the medical team. Along the way, the nurses performed various basic tests on them. Yun Xianxia, who was standing at the side, felt her heart clench as she repeatedly asked about the two children's condition. The nurses hurriedly comforted her, saying that there was no danger from the preliminary tests. As for the rest, they would have to undergo further tests at the hospital to confirm their condition. They told her not to worry too much. After all, the two children were still in good spirits. Other than their dislocated hands, there should be no other major issues. Only then did Yun Xianxia's heart. Yu's a little tired. Her lips curled into a smile as she patted her son's head. "Close your eyes and sleep. We'll be at the hospital soon. Mommy, you must tell the doctor that Yu is afraid of pain. You have to be gentle and not rough," the little boy warned with a serious expression. Yun Xianxia did not know whether to laugh or cry. The nurses at the side laughed as well. "Little boy, don't worry. We'll be very gentle. Don't worry." "Then I'm relieved." His brows relaxed as if he had heaved a sigh of relief. His witty sigh made the nurses smile again. "This little guy is so cute. He looks so fresh and his skin is so tender. He's so handsome. Yes. He'll definitely be very handsome when he grows up. I'm afraid he'll charm many little girls." Chapter 454. Yun Xianxia shifted her gaze to Xiao Yichen. He was lying there motionlessly, but his gaze never left her. He was captivated by her every frown and smile. Xiao Yichen blushed when he saw Yun Xianxia looking at him. He shyly averted his gaze and felt so awkward that he didn't know where to place his hands. Yun Xianxia slowly reached out and placed her hand on his. Her warmth traveled from the back of his hand all the way to his heart. Xiao Yichen's face turned even redder. His heart thumped furiously, and he was so nervous that he didn't dare to look at her. "Are you alone?" Yun Xianxia asked. "Why don't I see your daddy?" Xiao Yichen's face darkened slightly at the mention of Mu Yaja. "He doesn't want me anymore." He felt so aggrieved that his eyelashes fluttered down. "How could that be? He dotes on you a lot. But he doesn't want me anymore." "Really?" Xiao Yichen clenched his fists so tightly that his fingertips almost pierced through his palms. "Don't overthink it. What exactly happened?" Yun Xianxia comforted him. After being guided patiently, the little fellow finally told him the whole story. He told her about how Mu Yaja had given him a surprise birthday present and how he wanted to accompany him to Fairy Tale Valley to the Song Sisters coming over to cause trouble. In the end, he talked about how his father had gotten angry with him because of Song and Shi, and even left him alone in the amusement park. He told him everything in detail, no matter how big or small. Originally, he shouldn't have shed tears, but children were usually pretentious in front of their mothers. As he spoke, his eyes reddened, and tears flowed down his cheeks uncontrollably. This matter had obviously hurt him deeply. Yun Shirshi's heart ached when she heard it. She couldn't believe that Mu Yaja was such a cold-blooded father that he would leave his child alone in such a huge amusement park. She also learned from Li Hanlin that before Mu Yaja left, he had specifically instructed Li Hanlin to take good care of Xiao Yichen. Although she couldn't agree with how Mu Yaja had entrusted his child to an outsider, Yun Shirshir still believed that Xiao Yichen was still in his heart. Although Xiao Yichen shouldn't take full responsibility for the previous incident, it was inevitable that he would let his emotions affect his decisions and solve the problem in the wrong way. As a parent, she should patiently guide him until he untangled the knot in his heart. Perhaps a father's love wasn't as delicate as a mother's love, so he couldn't solve the problem from the root. At this time, what she should do was to straighten out the knot in the child's heart and let him understand his father. She shouldn't stand on the child's side and instigate conflict. Hence, she said, "Your daddy definitely cares about you. You shouldn't think of him that way. He cares about Song Enya and Song and Shi, not me." Xiao Yichen held back his tears and said with reddened eyes, "Today is my birthday. We should celebrate it properly." Yun Shirshir patiently comforted him again, telling him not to think too much. The ambulance soon arrived at the hospital. The two little guys were carried to the operating trolley and hurriedly sent to the emergency room. Yun Shirshir anxiously followed behind until she was politely blocked outside the door by a nurse. She then sat on the long bench outside the door in a daze, not knowing what to do. Chapter 455. Inside the doctor's office at the hospital, Song Enya sat anxiously in front of the doctor. The doctor looked at her, then at the man standing behind her with a cold expression. He slowly said, "The child has a soft tissue contusion on his head, and he has a mild concussion. The wound has been disinfected and stitched up. Don't let it come into contact with water for the next few days, and avoid spicy food." "Stitches?" Song Enya was startled and could not help but interrupt him. "Yes, how can he not be stitched up? The wound is a little deep. The child probably fell down the stairs and hit his head on the corner." The doctor adjusted his glasses and spoke in a more respectful tone. If it were any other patient, he would have long lost his patience after being interrupted repeatedly. However, he knew this woman's identity, so he treated her with utmost politeness and caution regardless of whether he offended her. Song Enya was stunned. "Is the wound that deep? Concussion? Is it that serious?" The doctor patiently explained, "It's just a mild concussion. It's not particularly serious, so there's usually no need for special treatment. He'll slowly recover with proper rest." "Will there be any impact on the brain? Will there be repercussions or something like that?" "No." The doctor rolled his eyes inwardly. "How can it be that serious? This woman is simply medically illiterate." Song Enya asked many more questions, most of which were whether the stitches on the back of Song Enshi's head would leave a scar. The answer was yes. It was inevitable that there would be a scar, and it would be difficult for hair to grow in that area in the future. Fortunately, the wound was not too big. It was only 3 stitches, and the area was about the size of a thumb. Girls had a lot of hair, so they just needed to cover it up. Mu Yaja's thoughts, however, were not on Song Enshi at all. In fact, he knew Xiao Yichen's character very well. Song Enshi kept saying that Xiao Yichen had pushed her down and even bullied her. However, the truth was that he was not present at the scene, so he could only know a thing or two about the situation from the child. The only thing he was certain of was that Xiao Yichen would not do such a bad thing. Compared to children his age, his personality was considered more mature. Therefore, he rarely played with children his age and always felt that they were childish. Therefore, it was even more impossible for him to take the initiative to bully a child, let alone commit such a vile act. However, the situation at that time was rather chaotic, and he did not have the time to understand what had happened. Song Enshi's cries alone were enough to give him a headache. At that time, the situation was urgent. The only thing he could do was to send the child to the hospital as soon as possible. After the incident, He deduced that Song Xianxia and Xiao Yichen must have gotten into some sort of conflict. Regardless of who started the conflict, Song Xianxia must have bitten Xiao Yichen first. In a moment of desperation, Xiao Yichen pushed her away. Xiao Yichen was a child who knew his limits. He had once warned him not to bully other children with violence. He had always been strict with himself and had done a good job. Perhaps Song Xianxia had been pushed and tripped on the steps, causing her head to bleed. That was probably the case. That was his guess. As a father, of course, he would choose to believe in his child. Moreover, his love for Song Xianxia was just for show. Xiao Yichen was his real son. If he didn't love him, who would he love? Chapter 456. He, too, wanted to give Xiao Yichen an unforgettable and blissful birthday. He had also pushed back many cases and even ended his agenda early to rush back and give him a surprise. But who would have thought that this birthday party would end in such a way where both sides would suffer? When they walked out of the doctor's office, Mu Yazha strode in front with Song Xianxia trailing behind him. She looked at the man's tall and handsome back and wanted to say something several times, but she stopped herself each time. This man's lofty image in her heart had always been irreplaceable. She had liked to stick to him since she was young. Logically speaking, since Jiang Qiming and Jiang Yishan were nieces, she should address this man as uncle. However, she felt that calling him uncle was too distant, so she always called him Brother Mu, as if this form of address was more intimate. As she grew older, this feeling gradually evolved into a young girl's throbbing heart and adoration. Although the two were related by blood, there were many marriages between cousins in the rich and powerful society, so there were no restrictions. She had dreamed of becoming Mu Yazha's bride since she was young. This had always been her wish. It was just that he already had a fiancé. This became the biggest thorn in her heart. There was no doubt that Mu Yazha was a perfect man. She was proud and arrogant, thinking that only such a man was worthy of her. The Song family was one of the most powerful and influential families in the capital. In terms of status, she and Brother Mu were a true match. That Mu Wanru, who came from nowhere, was not qualified to be Brother Mu's fiancé. Song Xianxia looked down on her very much. After deliberating for a moment, she caught up with Mu Yazha and walked beside him. She said cautiously, "Brother Mu, there are some things that I don't know if I should say." Mu Yazha, who was in a state of turmoil, only frowned when he heard her words. He walked into the smoking room, took out a cigarette from the cigarette box, lit it, and took a deep puff. Song Xianxia followed him in. Seeing his cold face and furrowed brows, she immediately thought of something and said, "Brother Mu, are you worried about Xiao Yichen?" Mu Yazha looked up at her but did not say a word. Song Xianxia continued, "Although Xiao Yichen shouldn't have bullied Xianxia like that, Brother Mu, you were too cruel to leave him alone at the amusement park. Xiao Yichen may have trained in the special forces since he was young, but do you really feel at ease leaving him alone?" Of course, he was worried. He regretted it the moment he left him behind. However, as a father, the dignity he should have was not to be looked down upon. Little Yichen had never disobeyed him, especially in front of outsiders. He had always been strict with him. In such a situation, even if he felt wronged, he should have suppressed it no matter what. He should not have added fuel to the fire. A 6-year-old child should give way to a 5-year-old girl. This was the philosophy of the upper-class gentleman and the family's unspoken rule. It was not to be violated. He just wanted to teach him a lesson. Besides, how could an insensible child be angry with her? How could that be? However, Mu Yazha did not say anything. Disciplining the child was his family's business, and he did not like outsiders interfering. Chapter 457. Mu Yazha's eyes flashed with impatience at his niece's words. Song Xianxia did not bother to look at his expression as she continued, "Still, it's good to teach the child a lesson. Children shouldn't be spoiled, especially boys. If they don't follow the rules from a young age, they won't be like those hedonistic sons of rich families when they grow up. They won't be disciplined and will ruin the family's discipline. Because of this, I don't think you've done anything wrong." Her words didn't go through the filter of her brain. Mu Yazha narrowed his eyes slightly, and displeasure quickly appeared on his face. And she has never suffered like this before. She even had to get 3 stitches in her back. Oh my God. She's always been vain. If she finds out about this, she'll definitely kick up a fuss, Enya. Mu Yaja flicked the ash off his cigarette and took one last puff before extinguishing it in the ashtray. He then slowly said, Mu Yichen is my son. She did not understand his expression, let alone the meaning behind his words. No matter how bad it is, it's not up to outsiders to judge. His voice was not loud, but it was powerful and filled with coldness. She was stunned. Only then did she realize that what she had said earlier was indeed inappropriate. She was extremely vexed. Brother Mu Yaja looked at her coldly, his tone icy. I dote on you because you're my cousin. You've been willful since you were young. Perhaps everyone dotes on you. But I think you know that there are some bottom lines about me that can't be crossed. Song and Xi's heart skipped a beat. She repeatedly adjusted her expression before she awkwardly tugged at the corner of her lips. Brother Mu, I'm sorry. I understand what you mean. I went overboard. Besides, you should go back and ask your sister what she did to anger Yichen. Mu Yaja walked up to her. Today is his birthday, and I should have accompanied him. I shouldn't have come with you guys in the first place. I'm very unhappy that this happened too. He was angry. Startled, Song Enya quickly explained, no matter how willful and she is, she can't possibly. This matter ends here. Don't talk about it anymore. Mu Yaja interrupted her impatiently and walked around her. Song Enya could sense that something was amiss. Feeling vexed at her self-righteous attitude earlier, she hurriedly chased after him. Ouch, ouch, ouch. There were 2 special-grade intensive care beds in the ward. By the time the 2 little fellows were wheeled out of the emergency room, their dislocations had already been fixed. Xiao Yichen's injuries were slightly more serious, so they still needed to be fixed with bandages for a few days. The 2 little munchkins were dislocated and had some abrasions. Xiao Yichen had hit his head in the car and had a slight concussion. However, it wasn't serious. He would recover after a few days of rest. The doctor patiently told Yun Shishir about some taboos, and Yun Shishir listened attentively. Throughout the entire process, Mu Yichen's face was tense. Even when his arm was reattached, his brows did not crease at all. He looked very brave. Yun Tianyu, on the other hand, could not bear the pain. However, when he saw Mu Yichen's strong look, he instinctively felt that he was too strong. With him as an example, no matter how much pain Yun Tianyu was in, he was too embarrassed to shed tears. Hence, he did not cry like other children. The doctor and nurses were surprised. A 6-year-old child usually did not have the ability to endure pain. Chapter 458. If it had been any other child, he or she would have burst into tears when the arm was reattached with this kind of injury. The nurses would have had to constantly coax him or her. Although it was a small injury, the reattachment was very painful. It was enough to frighten many timid children. However, these 2 little fellows were surprisingly patient. It was as if they were in a competition. Neither of them cried or made a fuss. The 2 little fellows were worry-free, and the doctor felt much more at ease. He quickly completed the simple treatment of the injury. Because of this, he could not help but praise Yun Shishir. Your 2 children are so brave. They didn't even cry. When Yun Shishir heard this, she did not know whether to be happy or worried. She always felt that when an outsider praised her 2 6-year-old children for being sensible, obedient, and mature, as a mother, other than feeling gratified, she also felt a little upset. When they returned to the ward, because Xiao Yichen's injury was more serious and he needed to be hospitalized, Yun Shishir hurriedly withdrew some money to pay for the hospital fees. She also bought some fruits and desserts. Children probably all like sweets. You love to eat Western biscuits and tiramisu. This time, Yun Shishir specially went to a Western biscuit shop and bought 2 sets. She also specially selected many different flavors and put in a lot of effort. Xiao Yichen had never eaten tiramisu before. When he took a bite, his eyes lit up. Yun Shishir was naturally happy when she saw that he liked it. She fed him mouthful by mouthful. Xiao Yichen, who was originally tense, gradually revealed a sincere smile. Is it good? Yun Shishir asked and fed him another mouthful. Xiao Yichen's eyes moved. He opened his mouth and took a mouthful. Milk foam filled his mouth. His heart felt warm. Mu Wanru had never fed him like this. The last time his daddy fed him was when he had a high fever and couldn't get out of bed. Daddy's actions were not as gentle as this. He seemed a little stiff and often scalded his mouth. It's so sweet. One more. Xiao Yichen happily curled his lips and licked the tip of his tongue. His eyes and brows resembled Muyaja, but when he smiled he was so cute and cheeky. He was extremely adorable. This child should smile more. He was very cute. She recalled the first time she saw him. His face was stern and cold. He turned around indifferently, but the coldness on his face made her heart palpitate. He looked exactly like that man when his face was tense. The father and son were exactly the same. However, a 6-year-old child was at his most innocent and naive. He should smile more. Yun Shirshir's mood brightened as she fed him spoonful after spoonful. Soon, the box of tiramisu. Alas, the boy did not seem to have had enough. With a greedy look, his gaze swept across the desserts. She could read his mind at a glance and smilingly said, "You can't eat too much desserts, or else your teeth will rot." "It's nothing. How about another pastry?" "One more." Xiao Yichen's eyes revealed his desire. His coquettish skills were not as good as Yun Tianyou's, so this level of desire was equivalent to him acting coquettishly to her. Yun Shirshir could not win against him. She repeatedly reminded him, "It's the last one." Thus, she opened the wrapping paper of the pastry. Xiao Yichen was secretly delighted. A child could not hide his thoughts, and this joy quickly surfaced on his face. Yun Shirshir did not know that he was not being greedy. He was clearly enjoying the process of her feeding him gently. No matter how much he disliked the pastry, he still found it delicious. Chapter 459. The pastry was small, but Yun Shirshir was afraid that the child would choke on it, so she deliberately broke it into 2 pieces. She then poured some milk into the pastry, dipped it in it, and fed it to him. "Awoo!" Xiao Yichen took a bite of the pastry. Combined with the milk's aroma, it tasted pretty good. Perhaps it was because Yun Shirshir fed it, so it tasted good no matter what. "Is it good?" "Yummy, yummy," Xiao Yichen said with satisfaction. The mother-son pair looked at each other and smiled warmly. Yun Tianyu lay on the hospital bed with a gloomy face. He seemed to be unhappy. He pouted, feeling that Mu Yichen had taken away his privilege. Why did Mommy only care about coaxing him and not asking him about his condition? Yun Tianyu suddenly felt a little regretful. He was indeed a little selfish. He was still a little reluctant to cede Yun Shirshir's love to Mu Yichen. Initially, he had enjoyed all of her love and affection, but now he had no choice but to accept it. Now, however, he had to give away half of it or even more. His heart ached a little. Hence, he covered the area where the bandage was wrapped and let out a few pitiful moans. Yun Shirshir heard his moans and felt as if a knife was being twisted in her heart. She seemed to realize that she had neglected the little guy. So she immediately turned to Yun Tianyu and asked anxiously, "What's wrong? Does your wound hurt?" Yun Tianyu shook his head and pretended to be strong. "It doesn't hurt. It must hurt. Mommy heard it." Yun Shirshir rubbed his little cheeks. "Yu has suffered. Mommy, give me a kiss." Yun Shirshir leaned over and planted a kiss on his forehead. Yun Tianyu was elated, but he proudly said, "Is 1 kiss enough?" No. "But Mommy will give you 2 more kisses." Yun Shirshir coaxed him. She then cupped his pink cheeks and gave him 2 more kisses. Yu then pursed his lips in satisfaction. The tears at the corners of his eyes had yet to dry, so he said coquettishly, "Yu's mouth is dry. I want to eat an orange." "All right. Mommy will peel it for you." Yun Shirshir dotingly scratched his nose bridge, then took out an orange and quickly peeled it. After peeling, she immediately separated the peeled tangerine into bags and fed it to him, piece by piece. With teary eyes, Yun Tianyu opened his mouth and took a bite of the orange. The sweet and sour juice immediately filled his mouth. Only then did his expression soften a little. Lying on the other bed, little Yichen stared at her with wide eyes. Inwardly, she was a little envious of the meticulous care Yun Tianyu received. Licking her dry lips in envy, she imitated Yun Tianyu and meekly called out, "It hurts." "Ugh, Yun Tianyou's expression froze for a moment. Was this lad imitating him? Yun Xianxia was startled. She immediately turned around and caressed Xiao Yichen's cheek with her warm palm. She asked with concern, "Where does it hurt?" "It hurts here." Xiao Yichen desperately squeezed out 2 pitiful tears and pointed to the dislocated shoulder. "It hurts so much." "Is it serious? Could it be that you didn't reattach it properly?" Yun Xianxia was nervous and at a loss. Xiao Yichen immediately comforted her. "It's okay. The doctor reattached it for me. Just hurts. I'll be fine after eating some biscuits." Yun Xianxia, Yun Tianyou. Chapter 460. He did not even frown when the doctor treated his arm in the emergency room earlier, yet he was already acting pretentious when his mommy peeled an orange for him. Yun Tianyou's face was sullen. What was worse was that his mommy had fallen into his trap. Hence, she obediently peeled an orange for him by his bedside. Yun Tianyou was a little displeased. This rascal was clearly trying to snatch his mommy away from him, wasn't he? How could he let him have his way? Yun Tianyou's eyes turned to Yun Xianxia, and he waved his hand. "Mommy, Yu wants to pee." Muichen. Yun Xianxia rushed over at once. She took the toilet paper from the drawer and carried Yun Tianyou to the bathroom. While Yun Xianxia was carrying him, Yun Tianyou stuck out his tongue at Muichen and made a face at him. He then smugly allowed Yun Xianxia to carry him away. Muichen was completely speechless. He did not think about Yun Tianyou's skills, though. Although he was young, he had Yun Xianxia under his thumb. How could Muichen be his match when it came to fighting for favor? Perhaps, Yun Tianyou was no match for him in terms of skills. However, Muichen was no match for Yun Tianyou when it came to scheming. Hence, in the bathroom, Yun Tianyou, who had taken off his underwear, began to stall for time. "I can't pee." After a long while, he blurted this out. Yun Xianxia did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Mommy will help you put on your underwear, then." "I don't want to." "Huh." Yun Xianxia was baffled. After a long while, Yun Tianyou said, "I think I want to pee." Yun Xianxia's lips twitched. "All right, call me mommy when you're done." Hence, Yun Xianxia was in a hurry to leave. Yun Tianyou pouted and said aggrievedly, "Mommy, don't go. I don't feel anything after you leave." Yun Xianxia fell silent. "What does it feel like to poop?" He explained matter-of-factly, "It's a feeling of security." Yun Xianxia, what was the meaning of this? After mommy left, Yu became restless. Yu is afraid of being alone. He was quite good at using idioms. Most importantly, she had never seen him so clingy. In the past, not to mention going to the bathroom, he could even go to school alone. Why now, Yun Xianxia, on the other hand, was a meticulous person. She found it strange for a moment, but she quickly figured out what he was thinking. Hence, she squatted down and calmly looked into his eyes. Yun Tianyou looked at her, too, only to be stunned by her odd expression and the teasing look in her eyes. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Let me guess." Yun Xianxia asked casually. "Is my little Yu jealous?" She guessed it right away. Yun Tianyou kept quiet and did not say a word. He still felt a little awkward in his heart. Yun Xianxia saw him lowering his head in silence and knew that she had guessed correctly. Hence, she cupped his little face and kissed his pouting lips. Her warm lips planted a soft kiss on his lips. Yun Tianyou's face quickly turned red from shyness. "Mommy, Yu, do you know? He's your older brother." "I know," Yun Tianyou said slowly. "He's my older brother. We have the same father and mommy." Yun Xianxia was a little surprised to hear that. So, he knew all about it? She was quite surprised. Chapter 461. That's right. The two children should know when they meet. Children's minds can be very delicate and sensitive at times. Yun Xianxia caressed his head and guided him patiently. "That's why you two should get along well." But his brows furrowed as he struggled internally. He knew that he was a little selfish and perhaps a little narrow-minded. Initially, he wanted to generously give half of his mommy's love to Muichen, but when he really did so, he was conflicted and reluctant to do so. This was especially so when he saw how gentle Yun Xianxia was to Muichen. His heart felt a little sour and stuffy. There was a lump of pent-up anger in his heart that could not be vented or dissipated. He felt very upset. He could not really share his mommy's love with Muichen. Yun Shirshir's heart clenched when she saw his aggrieved and upset expression. She then asked, "But what?" "But Mommy, Yu loves you and Mommy loves you too. That Muichen, doesn't he have his daddy? It's enough that he has his daddy's love. Why does he have to fight with Yu for Mommy?" "He's not fighting with you for Mommy." Yu's face suddenly showed an unprecedented panic and uneasiness. He grabbed Yun Shirshir's hand and held it tightly in his palm. "But he's clearly fighting with Yu. Mommy belongs to Yu. You must remember that Mommy isn't yours," Yun Shirshir patiently corrected him. Yu's eyes widened slightly. The focus in his eyes instantly became unfocused, and soon, dense ripples appeared in his eyes. Yun Shirshir's words were undoubtedly like a sharp sword that pierced his heart painfully. Wasn't Mommy his? The moment he recalled what his mother had said to him, he felt as if the sky had collapsed. His eyes were empty and his face was blank. A crystal-clear teardrop rolled down his cheek. Yun Shirshir frowned. Her heart ached because of the sadness in his eyes. However, there were some things that she had to tell him even though he was still young. Mommy isn't a thing. She shouldn't be Yu's private property. But you have to understand that Mommy loves you. However, Yu was still feeling very sad. The sound that came out of her throat was choked and broken. Her thick and long eyelashes were wet with tears, making her look even more pitiful. "But Yu loves Mommy. I hope that Mommy's love is only for Yu and not for anyone else. Yu, Mommy loves you and dotes on you the most. You should be able to feel it, right?" Yun Shirshir was a little anxious as she pressed his hand against her chest. Through the fabric of her clothes, he could feel her warm heartbeat. "Muichen, he's your older brother. Both of you are Mommy's flesh and blood. Both of you were born in the same year, month, and day. Do you know that? When you were born, your older brother was healthy, but you were always sick." "That's right. How unfair is that?" Hearing this, Yun Tianyu felt a little aggrieved, but he did not show it on his face. Instead, he said enviously, "That's right. How unfair is that?" Since he was young, he had always envied healthy children. Every minute and every second of the pain and torture of being sick was torture. When he was younger, he spent most of his time in the hospital. When he opened his eyes, it was a snow-white world. When he slept, it was endless darkness. Chapter 462. When he opened his eyes, he was greeted by a snow-white world. Even in his dreams, he was surrounded by endless darkness. The smell of disinfectant was something he hated the most. The sunlight he saw was mostly when he stood in front of the hospital window and looked at it. He could still vaguely remember that outside the hospital's window was a huge field of green grass. Many children who came to visit the patient were running and playing on the grass. They were holding hydrogen balloons in their hands as they chased each other. In a moment of carelessness, the balloon flew out of his hand and flew high into the sky. He held his head and watched in a daze as the balloon flew until it disappeared into the horizon and could no longer be seen. This was probably one of the few pleasures he had at that time. Yun Shirshir saw that his face was a little pale and knew that he had recalled something sad. Yu knew that he was in poor health. He also wanted to play, but the doctor had warned her not to let him run too much. Otherwise, it would lead to a lack of blood supply to the heart, breathing difficulties, and in severe cases, shock. She rarely let him go out to play with other children. Most of the time, she accompanied him to play puzzle games. Under Yun Shirshir's meticulous care, his health gradually improved. Yun Shirshir smiled faintly. You can't think of it that way though. Mommy has been separated from him for 6 years, so the love that should be given to you too was given to you." Yun Tianyu was startled. Was that so? Was he the one who had Muichen's love? Yun Shirshir continued, "Today, you told Mommy that brother saved you." Yu nodded in a daze. Indeed, it was Muichen who saved him. If not for him, the consequences would be unimaginable. Moreover, he knew very well that the assassin was obviously targeting him. On the way to the hospital, He repeatedly pondered over this matter and found it very fishy. Even though he told Xianxia that he was tired and wanted to sleep for a while. His mind was filled with thoughts of this matter the moment he closed his eyes. There were many suspicious points. Xianxia, of course, did not know what was going through Yun Tianyou's mind. She added, "Mommy finds it unbelievable too. Big brother is so awesome. He saved my..." Mommy is very grateful to him. Aren't you grateful? Regaining his senses, Yun Tianyu immediately replied, "Of course, I'm grateful. He saved me, so I'll do whatever he wants me to do." Yu is so sensible. Yun Shir kissed his forehead in relief. Yun Tianyu was a little conflicted. "I can't cede Mommy's love to him, though. Mommy, Yu loves you." Yun Shir emphasized seriously. Hearing that, the boy pursed his lips and nodded. "Mommy loves you. You can feel it. Mommy loves you, but I also love him. But that doesn't mean that you've lost your mommy. You also have your brother's favor, don't you?" Yun Tianyu was stunned for a moment before he fell into deep thought. After pondering over this sentence for a while, he quickly understood what Yun Shir wanted to express to him. Needless to say, he was a smart child and quickly figured out this problem. Therefore, he would not make things difficult for Yun Shir. It was just that he still needed some time to accept Wuxia. Yun Tianyu walked out of the bathroom and quietly returned to the bed. Chapter 463. Yun Shir followed behind him. She sighed helplessly when she saw him climb into bed alone and tidy up the blanket to cover himself. She knew that he had straightened out his thinking, but he still needed time to get to the bottom of it. It was indeed a little harsh for him to accept another child and share her motherly love with him all of a sudden. Yu had always been sensible and obedient, so Yun Shir sat back on the bed and asked gently, "Yu, do you want to drink some hot water?" "Yes, I do." Yu pursed his lips. Yun Shir hummed in acknowledgement and picked up the thermos beside her. Before leaving the room, Yun Shir specially reminded Xiaoyichen, help me take care of Yu. Wuxia glanced at Yun Tianyu and nodded obediently. Yun Shir then left the room. Just as the door closed, Yun Tianyu sat up from the bed abruptly. Xiaoyichen was startled. Seeing his gloomy face, he hurriedly asked, "What's wrong? It's very suspicious." "What do you mean?" Wuxia was a little confused by his abrupt words and did not immediately understand what he meant. Yun Tianyou's eyes were deep and cold. He suddenly turned to look at him and asked, "When did you find out about that man?" "Are you talking about the man who was chasing after us?" Wuxia raised a brow. Seeing that Yun Tianyu was talking about that man, he immediately replied, "After we entered the haunted house." "Didn't he see you?" "He saw me." "Then, why did you say that his target was me?" This matter was too suspicious. In the haunted house, he and Xiaoyichen looked exactly the same, especially in the dark. If that man had followed them from the haunted house, he should have seen Xiaoyichen. Yun Tianyu remembered that Xiaoyichen was carrying a panda at that time, but he was not. If that man's target was Xiaoyichen, then it would be easy to identify him from his clothes. Unless he was not the only one who was targeting him? Many thoughts flashed through his mind. Yun Tianyu had already thought of many possibilities, but he dismissed them one by one. Wuxia did not know what was on his mind and only said solemnly, "That's because his target was very clear from the start. I don't know when that man started following you guys. At least, before we entered the haunted house, he was already following us. At the time, the panda I was carrying was so conspicuous. After entering the haunted house, I noticed that someone was following behind me, so I dropped the panda on the ground. He didn't even look at it and just walked past, which means that his target wasn't me. Then he..." Halfway through his words, Yun Tianyou's pupils violently constricted, and his voice instantly turned cold. "I understand now." "What do you understand?" Wuxia's curiosity was piqued by his words. "Perhaps, that man's target wasn't just me." Yun Tianyu suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Perhaps, that man's target was him and his mommy from the start. Fortunately, his mommy was separated from them in the haunted house. As his biggest target, that man naturally wanted to get rid of him first. Thinking deeper, he could not help but feel a little terrified. His phone rang all of a sudden. He picked it up and saw that it was a call from Li Hanlin. He picked it up. Hello. Director Yun, are you at the hospital? Chapter 464. His voice sounded wary. Yun Tianyu immediately got off the bed and walked to the window. Lowering his voice, he answered, Yes, I'm here. How's your injury? Is it serious? Li Hanlin's tone was anxious as he asked with concern. Forgive me for not being able to visit you at the hospital right away. It's all right, it's nothing serious. Yun Tianyu paused for a moment before changing the topic. How's that matter of yours? Yes. I've caught the culprit, but according to the surveillance footage, there are 2 of them. There's still one left. His voice got softer as he spoke, afraid that Yun Tianyu would reprimand him for his incompetence. Yun Tianyu's tone suddenly turned gloomy. How did you do your job? Li Hanlin held the phone in his hand with tears streaming down his face. He knew it. He had done his best, though. Where is he? Yun Tianyu calmed himself down and asked. Since he had caught the culprit, he must not hand him over to the police. He must force the culprit to reveal the ins and outs of the matter. Li Hanlin immediately replied respectfully, The culprit has been detained in a warehouse in the suburbs and is under heavy guard. However, he's been very tight-lipped and won't say anything. Yun Tianyu frowned and his lips curled into a sinister smile. Won't say anything? Yes. We've taken precautions to ensure his safety. Yun Tianyu praised, Yes. You've done well. You'll get a raise this month. What a rare and precious gift. Li Hanlin was immediately moved to tears. Thank you, Director Yun. You've finally given me a raise. The family can barely afford to eat. Yun Tianyu frowned in disdain. He looked out of the window and was lost in thought for a moment. Suddenly, he made a decision in his heart. He won't say anything, huh? Yes. We've tried everything. This guy is very tight-lipped and won't divulge anything. We found a poison sac in his mouth. Poison sac? Yun Tianyu frowned. What's that? Director Yun, this person is a professional assassin. The poison sac is in his mouth. Once he bit it open, he committed suicide by drinking the poison. Li Hanlin explained. Yun Tianyu felt a chill run down his spine. This method was too ruthless. After a while, he said, Come pick me up tonight. I'll interrogate him personally. President Yun, I don't think that's a good idea. Li Hanlin asked in surprise. Just do what I say. Don't doubt me. With that, he hung up. When he turned around, Mu Yichen was still leaning against the bed. He was quite a distance away, so he could not clearly hear the conversation between Yun Tianyu and Li Hanlin over the phone. However, he was keenly aware of the change in Yun Tianyu's aura the moment he picked up the call. Cold, austere, and aggressive. The moment he got off the bed and walked toward the window, Mu Yichen caught sight of Yun Tianyu's incomparably cold and dark eyes. He was a completely different person from the naive and romantic look he had in front of Yun Xianxia. He had witnessed Yun Tianyu's calmness before. When the Ferris wheel malfunctioned, if it were any other child, they would have been scared to tears. However, he didn't. Instead, he calmly made a phone call and then sat down patiently. Even after falling out of the carriage, although there was a moment of panic on his face, he quickly calmed down. He had never seen such a frightening look in a child's eyes before, though. Yun Tianyu looked at Mu Yichen. His heart was in a dilemma. Should he tell him about this matter? After hesitating for a moment, he decided to hide it from him. He would handle this matter well without anyone's interference. Thus, he lay back on the bed. Chapter 465. When Mu Yaja and Song Enya returned to the ward one after another, the rest of the Song family rushed over one after another. Song Xianxia was now the apple of the Song family's eye, a little princess who was doted on. Upon hearing that something had happened to her, Song Yunxi and Jiang Qiming hurried over. In the ward, Song Xianxia was still crying nonstop. When she saw that her brother and mother had arrived, her coquettish skills became even more powerful. She kept throwing tantrums in Jiang Qiming's arms. Her face was wet with tears, and her eyes were red and swollen. Jiang Qiming's heart ached terribly. When she saw that a piece of hair at the back of Song Xianxia's head had been shaved off and that the wound had been stitched up and was still bleeding, her heart ached so much that her eyes moistened. Song Xianxia stood at the side and kept coaxing her. He loved this younger sister of his from the bottom of his heart. Ever since she was born, he had given her the greatest love. However, he was usually busy with work and could not take care of this younger sister of his. Hence, the little girl did not appreciate his coaxing. Jiang Qiming kept coaxing her, but Song Xianxia did not give in to her. There was nothing Jiang Qiming and Song Xianxia could do. When Song Xianxia saw that Mu Yaja had arrived, she immediately wanted to break free from Jiang Qiming's embrace and spread her arms and legs toward him. "Uncle Mu, hug me! Uncle Mu, hug me!" When she saw Mu Yaja, Jiang Qiming did feel some resentment toward him. However, the Muse and the Songs were on good terms and had been friends for hundreds of years. Hence, even though she had a lot of complaints, she still maintained a very polite expression on the surface. After all, she could not make things too awkward. Otherwise, both families would not be able to show their faces. They had to give each other face. Hence, Jiang Qiming said politely, "Yaja, you're here?" Aunt Jiang." Mu Yaja called out. Song Xianxia also called out unnaturally, "Uncle?" "Yes," Mu Yaja responded, as if he didn't see the awkward expression on Song Xianxia's face. Song Xianxia was only 4 years older than him, but Mu Yaja was older than him. For the proud and arrogant Song Xianxia, calling him Uncle Mu was a bit awkward. While Jiang Qiming wasn't paying attention, Song Xianxia jumped off her body and snuggled into Mu Yaja's arms. Mu Yaja had no choice but to carry her in his arms. His feelings towards Song Xianxia were rather complicated right now. She was more concerned about Xiao Yichen. She had been waiting for his call, but he hadn't called yet. Was the little fellow still angry with him? Song Xianxia squirmed restlessly in his arms. It was obvious that she had been wronged and wanted his comfort. But right now, he didn't have the mood to deal with this little fellow's coquetry. Song Xianxia stared at his side profile dejectedly, her face full of grievance. Jiang Qiming looked a little embarrassed and smiled. "Aya, look at this child. She's injured, yet she's still so restless. Still, I don't know why and she especially likes to stick to you." Mu Yaja patted her head but didn't say anything. Song Enya chimed in from the side. "Yes, and she likes Uncle Mu the most, right?" Song Xianxia immediately said cheerfully, "Yes, yes. And she likes Uncle Mu the most. And she likes Uncle Mu the most." With that, she leaned her head sweetly into Mu Yaja's arms. Mu Yaja coldly curled his lips. From start to finish, he looked a little absent-minded. Chapter 466. The corners of Mu Yaja's lips curled up coldly. From the beginning to the end, he looked a little absent-minded. For a moment, the atmosphere was inevitably a little awkward. Song Enya also felt extremely awkward. Thinking of the things she should not have said to Mu Yaja earlier, she did not know how to smooth things over for a moment. Jiang Qiming laughed awkwardly, but she was extremely unhappy inside. Today was supposed to be Children's Day, so she had asked Song Enya to bring Song Xianxia to the amusement park for a day of fun. It could also be considered a happy Children's Day for the children, but the latter ended up injured and lying in the hospital. She had roughly heard the whole story from Song Enya. She did not explain it clearly over the phone, but Song Enya pushed all the blame to Xiao Yichen. But in reality, Song Enya was also responsible for this. She was the one who brought Song Xianxia out, so she was considered the child's guardian and parent. How could she not be responsible for the child's injury? At that time, Mu Yaja said that he was going to the dessert station, so she should have stayed behind to take care of the 2 children. However, out of selfishness, she wanted to have some privacy with Mu Yaja, so she went with him, leaving the 2 5-year-old children behind. Since something had happened, she simply pushed the blame to Mu Yichen. Perhaps she was used to being spoiled since young, or perhaps this was a common problem of Missy. She always felt that she was not in the wrong and had no sense of responsibility. However, she did not think that if she had stayed behind to take care of the children, would such an incident have happened? When she told Jiang Qiming about this matter, she only said that Mu Yichen had pushed her and did not mention that Song Xianxia had bitten Mu Yichen at all. He recounted the entire incident out of context. Of course, Jiang Qiming believed that it was his son who had been mischievous and pushed Song and Shi from start to finish. Therefore, when Mu Yaja sat there with a cold expression and an absent-minded look, Jiang Qiming was more or less displeased. Her child was injured. There was a deep cut on the back of her head that required 3 stitches and a piece of her hair was shaved off. She did not know if the cut would grow back in the future. The child had never experienced such hardships since he was young. Logically speaking, as Mu Yichen's mother, Mu Yaja should also be responsible. Anyone with a bit of responsibility wouldn't have such a cold expression. However, even though she was displeased, she did not dare to voice her displeasure. Although the Song family is a prestigious family in the capital, and with old master Song status, they are still far from the Mu family's influence. Therefore, the Song family had to give the Mu family face no matter what. Even so, Jiang Qiming still felt a little uncomfortable. Hence, she glared at Song and Shi and said, "Uncle Mu is tired. Get off me. Why do you always like to stick to me?" Song and Shi snorted. "I don't want that. I like Uncle Mu. Haven't you suffered enough?" Jiang Qiming was a little anxious and scolded, "You're really disobedient." Sob sob. "Mommy yelled at me." Song and Shi's little face scrunched up as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Mom, and she likes Brother Mu. Just let her go." Song Enya said from the side. Mu Yaja suddenly put Song and Shi down and stood up. He was still worried about Mu Yichen. It was getting late, and Fairy Tale Valley would be closed soon. Chapter 467. Even if it was a punishment, it should end here. Even if Mu Yichen did not call to sincerely apologize, he had already lost his patience. Seeing that he was about to leave, Song Enya immediately went up to him and asked, "Brother Mu, where are you going?" "I'm going to pick up the children." Mu Yaja curtly replied. Jiang Qiming picked up Song and Shi and suddenly said, "Yaja, there's something that I must remind you of. Boys can't be spoiled. This sense of responsibility must be nurtured from a young age. Take my Yunxi for example. He was also mischievous when he was young and caused trouble everywhere. However, I've told him since he was young that a man must be responsible. If he made a mistake, he should bear the consequences himself. Naturally, the Songs won't pursue this matter. However, I still hope that Mu Yichen can come and apologize to my Yanxi." Mu Yaja's back view paused. In an instant he exuded a sharp aura. He slowly turned around, but the expression on his face was even colder. "How to discipline my son is my family's matter. It's not up to the Songs to interfere." Jiang Qiming's expression turned ugly. Song Yunxi could not bear to listen to this and said unhappily, "Uncle Mu, what do you mean by this? The Songs have already given us enough face after this incident. Now, they just want Mu Yichen to apologize." "Sure." Mu Yaja coldly interrupted her. Song Yunxi was stunned. Jiang Qiming's face immediately revealed a gratified smile. Then, can she also ask Xiao Yichen to apologize to him for biting Xiao Yichen? Jiang Qiming's smile instantly froze at the corner of her mouth. "What do you mean?" "What do I mean? You should ask your daughter," Mu Yaja said and left the ward. Everyone was left looking at each other. Song Enya walked up to Song and Shi and asked coldly, "What exactly happened today?" Song and Shi raised her head and looked at her with teary eyes. She was probably most afraid of Song Enya at home. She knew that she had made a mistake, and more importantly, she had made Uncle Mu unhappy. While feeling wronged, he also felt a little regretful. Furious, the Missy hollered, "Say something. What the hell is going on? Why did Mu Yichen push you?" Song and Shi burst into tears after being yelled at by her. Song Yunxi's heart ached. She immediately stepped forward and said, "The child is still young. Don't be so fierce to her. Brother, you're always spoiling her. Look at her, how willful has she become?" She glared at him and lowered her head to threaten him. "Uncle Mu won't like you if you don't behave yourself. Woo woo. It's all Mu Yichen's fault. He didn't let me look at his watch, and he even snatched Uncle Mu away from me. Sob sob. He even said that I was ugly, so I was so angry that I bit him, just once. Sob sob. She sobbed and wept as she recounted the whole story. It turned out that Mu Yichen really did not use much force when he pushed her. She had deliberately pretended to be pushed so that she could complain to Uncle Mu when the time came. She did not expect that she would fall on the stairs and hit the back of her head, resulting in this disaster. This time, Jiang Qiming's face turned white with anger. She picked up her daughter's little hand and slapped it hard. "Why didn't you tell Mommy earlier?" "I was afraid that Mommy would scold me." Her phone suddenly rang. Chapter 468. Song Enya looked in the direction of the voice and saw that Mu Yaja's phone had slipped out of his pocket while he was sitting on the sofa. She picked it up. Initially, she did not want to pick it up, but when she saw the picture of a woman sleeping on the screen, she realized that the caller ID was a picture of a woman. In the picture, the woman's face was elegant and refined. Even though she was sleeping without makeup, she was still beautiful beyond compare. Her messy hair was scattered on the pillow. Against her snow-white skin, it was messy, but it did not diminish her beauty at all. The caller ID was only one word, sure. This was Mu Yaja's phone. She should not have picked up the call. However, when she looked at the photo on the caller ID, her imagination started to run wild. For some reason, she actually picked up the phone. Yun Shishir went to the nurse's station to ask where the hot water room was. The nurse was busy, so she did not answer her seriously. She searched for it for a long time, but she could not find it. She was about to return to the ward when she suddenly remembered that Xiao Yichen needed to be hospitalized. Should she call Mu Yaja? She was too nervous when she sent the two children to the hospital outside the emergency room. After that, she was busy taking care of the two little guys. She was in a mess. Now that she suddenly remembered that she should contact Mu Yaja to come to the hospital. Even if there was a misunderstanding between father and son, they should communicate in time, right? Thus, she took out her phone and dialed a number. The phone rang a few times before it was picked up. On the other end, a woman's sharp and somewhat targeted voice asked, "Who are you?" Yun Shishir was stunned. The woman on the other end was obviously a little impatient. "Speak." "Hello, is Miyaja there?" The woman gritted her teeth and said, "No." Then she hung up the phone. Yun Shishir was stunned for a moment. She laughed at herself, but her heart ached. She thought that he must be very busy or was giving the children a punishment. In fact, he was very concerned about the children, but she called to tell him that Xiao Yichen was in the hospital and to come over to take care of the children. She did not expect a woman to pick up the phone. What was the meaning of this? Yun Shishir was a little angry. She felt sorry for Xiao Yichen. Previously, she had thought that Mu Yaja was a responsible father, but now, she had to put a question mark in her heart. It's fine if you don't come. Who he was with had nothing to do with her. He didn't care about the children. She would take care of them. She was more than happy to take care of the child. As for him, what did he have to do with her? As she thought about this, she stood at the elevator door and waited to return to the ward. The elevator took a long time to arrive. The floor of the ward was high, so it took a while to get to the elevator. Suddenly, a hurried voice called out from behind him, "Brother Mu." She furrowed her brows and turned her head to take a look. Now that she thought about it, she shouldn't have turned back at that time. She wouldn't have caused a series of problems because of that scene. However, this was a story for another time. She turned around and saw Mu Yaja walking down the stairs, followed by a woman with a hurried expression. At first, the man did not seem to be in the mood to respond to her call. He walked down the stairs without looking back. Until the woman called out, "You left your phone with me. Don't you want it?" Mu Yaja stopped in his tracks and turned around. Song Enya immediately chased after him with a smile. Yun Shishir originally wanted to walk over when she saw him, but when she heard the woman's words, her heart skipped a beat. Mu Yaja's phone was with her? Was she the woman who had spoken sarcastically to her over the phone earlier? Chapter 469. For a moment, he froze on the spot. Song Enya walked up to Mu Yaja with a smile. The tender smile on her face made Mu Yaja a little dazed. He seemed to see the shadow of his mother when she was young in her. For a moment, he was stunned and could not react. Song Enya took out her phone. Mu Yaja reached out to take it, but she playfully put it away and carried it behind her back. Her mischievous look was just like when she was with him when they were young. "Brother Mu, don't be angry with me." Mu Yaja was stunned, but he did not say a word. The anger in his heart was greatly reduced by this smile that resembled his mother's. Song Enya knew that the man's cold expression was a sign of anger, so she reached out and hugged his shoulders. Acting coquettishly, she said, "Brother Mu, I'm sorry. I went overboard with my words just now. Perhaps today's matter was indeed a misunderstanding. I shouldn't have said that. I didn't mean to say that. Please forgive me, okay? Please?" Song Enya acted coquettishly. Mu Yaja had been indulging her since they were young. Sometimes, when she went overboard and angered him, she would coax him like this and beg for his forgiveness. This trick was tried and tested. Sure enough, Mu Yaja's expression improved a lot. "Yes. You're really not angry anymore?" Song Enya smiled in surprise and raised her head to look at his expression. She saw that his ice-cold expression had softened a little. Song Enya knew that he was no longer angry, and her heart was overjoyed. "Thank you, Brother Mu. Brother Mu, when you go back today, you must apologize to Xiao Yichen on my and Xi's behalf. I didn't fulfill my responsibility as an elder sister today, so I feel guilty toward Xiao Yichen. Tell him that I'll definitely apologize to him with Xi next time. Go up." Mu Yaja did not say much. He just reached out and patted her head lovingly, urging her to go upstairs to the ward. Song Enya nodded and handed the phone to him before reluctantly heading upstairs. Mu Yaja took the phone and was about to leave when he caught sight of a familiar figure from the corner of his eye. His expression froze as he turned his head, only to see Xianxia standing at the elevator entrance with a hot water bottle in her hand. Her eyes were fixed on him the whole time. His face, however, was cold enough to make one's heart palpitate. Xianxia looked at him coldly. Her eyes, however, were still. It was as if her heart was as dead as ashes. There was not a single ripple in it. She did not know why, but when she saw Song Enya hugging Mu Yaja earlier, the look of indulgence on the man's face inadvertently made her heart bleed profusely as if it had been sliced open by a razor blade. If she hadn't seen this scene with her own eyes, she wouldn't have known that this man actually had such a gentle side. Would he show such a doting and indulgent expression to a woman? Song Enya threw herself into his arms, but he did not push her away. The indulgence on his face undoubtedly pierced her heart. She did not care who this woman was or what her status was. She did not care about their relationship, nor why Mu Yaja did not appear in Xiao Yichen's ward when he was in the hospital. Instead, he appeared at the staircase with an unfamiliar woman. What she cared about was what position Xiao Yichen had in this man's heart. Chapter 470. So, those gentle gazes that he had shown her before were nothing more than an illusion? Was he just putting on an act? Was this woman the one he liked? So, what was she? Xianxia was a little confused, and her mind was in a mess. However, that wasn't what made her heart turn cold at this moment. Instead, it was the fact that Xiao Yichen was still lying in the ward, feeling sad because of his heartlessness. Yet, he was still here, hugging a woman? When Mu Yaja saw her standing there, an inexplicable sense of panic flashed across his face, but he quickly suppressed it. He didn't know how much she had seen or heard. He also didn't know what this stupid woman was thinking as she stared at him motionlessly. Thus he asked, "Why are you here?" They weren't far apart, and the man's voice was powerful and resonant. However, she acted as if she hadn't heard him and turned around. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for her floor, intending to return to the ward. Mu Yaja saw that she ignored him and didn't respond to his question. She only minded her own business and walked into the elevator. In a fit of anger, he strode over to the elevator. Just as the elevator doors were about to close, he reached out and forcefully blocked the doors from closing. His hand was viciously caught between the doors. Xianxia was shocked, but she saw the elevator doors open again. The man strode in and stood in front of her with a condescending look on his face. "What do you mean?" She was baffled by his question. "What do you mean by, what do you mean? I don't know what you're talking about. I asked you, why are you here? You ignored me and turned around to enter the elevator. What do you mean by that?" Mu Yaja was enraged by her indifference. When the elevator doors closed, he took a step forward and forced her into a corner. Yun Shirshir wasn't shocked or angry. Her face was calm as if her heart had died. Instead of answering, she asked, "Am I not supposed to be here? Or am I interrupting you flirting with another woman? If that's the case, then I'm really sorry." Her sarcastic tone caused the man's face to instantly turn cold. Flirting? What are you thinking about all day long? Flirting? Xianxia was his cousin. It was just a hug between siblings, so how could she call it flirting? If they weren't in public, he really wanted to teach this woman a lesson. Yun Shirshir said indifferently, "I don't want to know anything. Who she is, what's your relationship, and what you're doing, I'm not interested." Her cold words were so harsh to the ears. What did he mean by she wasn't interested in knowing? What did she know? What did he know? Mu Yaja didn't know why she suddenly went crazy. He suddenly thought of something and the corners of his mouth curled up in a mischievous arc. He asked, "Jealous?" "Why would I be jealous?" She calmly denied. Mu Yaja's smile froze and his face darkened. Her nonchalant attitude made him really unhappy. "Then what are you angry about? Or, in your eyes, am I not worthy of your trust?" Looking at him, she was reminded of Xiao Yichen's sad face and the frightening scene that happened at the amusement park today. She thought of how the Ferris wheel had malfunctioned and how the two children had almost met with an accident. Then, she recalled the scene of Xianxia and Mu Yaja hugging. Now that she looked at his face again, she suddenly felt that the scene just now was too glaring. She felt a little sour in her heart. Today is Xiao Yichen's birthday. Even if there's a misunderstanding between father and son, should he just leave the child alone at the amusement park? If this is a punishment, don't you think it's too much? Chapter 471. How could he not know that something had happened to Xiao Yichen? He was Mu Yichen's father. At that thought, Yun Shirshir felt a chill run down her spine. "I originally thought that you were a responsible father," she suddenly said. Mu Yaja was stunned. Her strange words had caught him off guard. She continued coldly, "I don't know what position Xiao Yichen has in your heart, but I'm very disappointed in you." Her words had infuriated him. What did she mean by accusing him without distinguishing between right and wrong? Was it because he had spoiled her too much that she had become arrogant because of that? "Woman, have I indulged you too much?" Although Mu Yaja tried his best to control himself, he still couldn't stop himself from grabbing her shoulders tightly. His fingers tightened around her shoulders. Her words had undoubtedly offended him, so he sneered, "You have no right to judge what kind of father I am." "No right?" Yun Shirshir stared at him in a daze for a long time. Her eyelashes trembled slightly, and she suddenly mocked him. This mocking remark was his excessive concern for her. Yes, she had no right. He was right. What right did she have to criticize him? 6 years ago, she was the one who gave up Xiao Yichen's custody, wasn't she? She wasn't a good mother to begin with. She was the one who gave up her child's custody. Therefore, what right did she have to criticize Mu Yaja for being irresponsible? She had no right to criticize him. She really had no right to do so. Even so, when she thought of Xiao Yichen's heart-wrenching disappointed expression, her heart ached. "I have no right? Then do you have the right?" Yun Shirshir gritted her teeth and said, "I know that I don't have custody of Xiao Yichen. In name, I'm not Xiao Yichen's mother. I was the one who gave up my child's custody. But Mu Yaja, Xiao Yichen is also my flesh and blood. I won't cause you any trouble regarding his custody. I'm just disappointed that when Xiao Yichen got into trouble, where were you?" Xiao Yichen got into trouble? What happened? Mu Yaja's heart skipped a beat. He was confused. What happened to him? "Don't you think it's too late for you to ask now?" she said bitterly. "If you don't know how to take care of him, I can take care of him." The child was still young and insensible. Of all the things he should do, shouldn't the father and son communicate properly? Even if there's a huge misunderstanding, there's nothing that's not clear? Is there a need to leave him there alone? The more she thought about it, the more furious she became. "I don't know whether your heart is warm or not," she said, questioning him. "Today is the child's birthday, but what did you do?" Mu Yaja only felt frustrated. This stupid woman was condemning him righteously. He didn't care, but he cared about what happened to Xiao Yichen, but she didn't say anything. Wasn't the child in the amusement park? What could have happened? He had arranged for him to receive training in the special forces since he was young. Whether it was survival in the wild or various subjects, Xiao Yichen's results were amazing. That was why he was relieved to leave him alone in the amusement park. Didn't he want to play? Then what would happen if he let the child have fun in the amusement park? Chapter 472. Yun Shishir sneered. You said that I don't have the right to ask, then let me ask you, what am I in your heart? What right do I have? Even if I don't even have the right to ask, what am I in your eyes? You can summon me at your beck and call. You can tease me when you're in a good mood and humiliate me when you're in a bad mood, right? Mu Yaja said coldly, shut up. His gaze was as sharp as a knife as it pierced her body. He felt that she was being too presumptuous with her words. Was there a need for her to make such guesses about what he thought of her? Yun Shishir's heart turned even colder after being yelled at by him. I originally thought that you'd be cold to everyone, but halfway through her words, she recalled the doting and indulgent side of this man towards Song Enya, and a part of her heart suddenly collapsed. She suddenly felt a little ashamed. Towards this man, she actually had a damnable heart. Now that her heart had given up, it was all over. I'm sorry, I was thinking too much. The elevator doors opened when it reached her floor. She turned around and left without looking back. Back in the ward, she began to pack her things. Yu could not help feeling puzzled when he saw her pale face. Mommy, what's wrong? Why were you gone for so long? Yun Shishir did not want him to see the loss of composure on her face as she packed her things with her back facing him. She was very upset and felt a stabbing pain in her heart. Yu and Xiao Yichen looked at each other, completely clueless about what had happened. Yu did not have a lot of things, only a small backpack and some personal belongings. Yun Shishir walked to Yu's bed and said, Yu, let me take you home. Yu nodded. Xiao Yichen sat up nervously when he heard this. He looked at Yun Shishir, who had a strange expression on her face, and asked uneasily, Are you leaving? He could not bear to leave her. He should have called his daddy when he was admitted to the hospital. However, for some reason, he did not want to call him. There was anger in it, but more than that, he wanted to spend more time with her. Seeing that she was about to leave, he suddenly felt a little flustered. What about me? Mu Yaja had already entered the ward. Just as he stepped into the ward, he saw the little lads with different injuries on the two beds. His face sank and he frowned. When he saw Mu Yaja's call, he opened his mouth and wanted to call him daddies, but when the word he wanted to call. He did not want to talk. There were some things to this day. It was supposed to be a happy birthday, but now it was like this. He was angry, so he didn't want to talk to him. What's going on? Mu Yaja asked after a moment of shock. Xiao Yichen ignored him, too. Yun Tianyu looked at Yun Shishir's expression and then at the man. He was sensitive enough to know that this man must have angered his mommy again, so he ignored him even more. He gave Mu Yaja a bad review in his heart. Lousy. People who make mommy angry are the worst. Unforgivable. Yun Shishir decided to leave with Yu. Yu's injuries were not serious. As his elder brother, Xiao Yichen had always been responsible for protecting him, so his injuries were not serious. Chapter 473. Although this child had never called her mommy, that sense of closeness was irreplaceable by the word mommy. Feeling helpless, Yun Shishir walked to his bedside and said gently, Auntie is leaving. You have to be well, okay? Little Yichen's heart ached. He opened his mouth, wanting to persuade her to stay, but no matter what, he could not bring himself to do so. He felt that he had no say in this. Xiao Yichen lowered his head dejectedly. His eyes were filled with reluctance, sadness, and even attachment. However, the little guy was afraid that Yun Shishir would make things difficult for him, so he hid it well. From start to finish, he did not say anything. Yun Shishir's heart ached when she saw him in such a despondent state. She wanted to reach out and caress his face, but Mu Yaja was present. Recalling his words earlier, her heart turned cold. Thus, she retracted her hand, picked up Yu and left. When he brushed past Muyaja, Yun Tianyu looked at Muyaja with chilling eyes. Muyaja did not turn back to ask him to stay. When he walked to the bedside, he saw Xiao Yichen staring blankly at Yun Shishir's departure. For a moment, he was so sad that he almost suffocated. Seeing the mother and son disappear from the door of the ward, he couldn't help but flip over and get off the bed. He didn't care about his injured hand and stumbled to the door. But at this moment he stopped in his tracks. Leaning against the door, he watched Yun Shishir and Yun Tianyu enter the elevator. When the elevator door closed, it was as if the sky had collapsed. Xiao Yichen mumbled, "Mommy," tears fell from his eyes in a daze. He kept feeling that her departure had left a huge hole in his heart that couldn't be filled no matter how hard he tried. Muyaja went to the door and picked him up. Looking at his bandaged arm, he raised his eyebrows slightly and asked in a deep voice, "What happened to your hand?" He didn't know what had happened today. He thought that the children were playing in the amusement park and the machine had malfunctioned. However, little Yichen turned his head away, not wanting to bother with him. She felt a little guilty towards him. She shouldn't have left him alone in the amusement park. But at that time, the situation was urgent. At that time, he was a little worried about Song and Shi's injury. He was not in the mood to ask which child was at fault. These were all trivial matters. He was only anxious to send the child to the hospital. This was also his responsibility, wasn't it? But he stubbornly refused to leave. He tried to pick up Xiao Yichen by force, but the child pushed him away and threw a tantrum. He simply left him there and let him play to his heart's content. When he was young, when he was willful, his father also punished him in the same way. Perhaps he didn't think that there was anything wrong with it, but if it hurt the child, it was an unintentional mistake. Now, he was very regretful. He felt guilty towards the child, so he took a step back, which was rare of him. "It's Daddy's fault. It's Daddy's fault. I shouldn't have left you there. Are you willing to forgive Daddy?" "I'm not willing." Xiao Yichen replied awkwardly and ignored him. His mind was filled with the sad expression on Yun Shishir's face when she left. He missed her a little. They had just parted not long ago, but he was already missing her. He missed her gently feeding him tiramisu and her warm embrace when she hugged him. His tears suddenly burst out uncontrollably. He rarely cried. In fact, he almost never cried. Chapter 474. On the way back to the Mu residence, Xiao Yichen was so angry that he did not utter a word. He did not mention a word about what had happened that day. Muyaja tried to hug him a few times, but he avoided him without a word. Muyaja tried coaxing and asking, but the little lad refused to fall for his tricks. Neither soft nor hard methods worked on him. He was at his wit's end. If he did not answer, he would find out the truth himself. In fact, Yun Tianyu and Xiao Yichen had reached an agreement to keep what had happened that day a secret. Yun Tianyu had repeatedly told him not to tell anyone about it, not even Muyaja. Little Yichen obeyed his father's words and kept this matter a secret. Even if Muyaja wanted to find out the truth, he should not think about who owned Fairy Tale Valley. Even if he wanted to interfere, would Yun Tianyu give him the chance to do so? He wanted to find out the truth himself. However, this was a story for another day. When Muyaja and Xiao Yichen reached home, the team of private doctors was already waiting for them at the door. The car door opened, and Muyaja carried Xiao Yichen out of the car. The doctors immediately greeted them respectfully. Mu Wanru and Mu Sheng had also returned to the Mu residence. Seeing that Xiao Yichen was injured, Mu Sheng turned pale with fright and immediately went forward to ask about his well-being. However, Xiao Yichen was not in the mood and did not want to say much. He only said, "I'm tired." He was then escorted back to his room for an injection and an foredrip. Mu Wanru also asked about what had happened, but Muyaja returned to his study room and buried himself in the company's planning documents. She was at her wit's end. When she heard from the servants that Muyaja had brought Xiao Yichen to the amusement park, she felt a little suffocated. Late at night, Mu Wanru deliberately walked to the back garden and picked up the phone. A man's dejected voice came from the other end. "Miss Mu, I'm sorry. The mission failed." What? This was the first thing she received when she picked up the call. Mu Wanru gritted her teeth in exasperation but quickly suppressed her anger. Where is he? There was a few seconds of silence on the other end. Mu Wanru said irritably, Damn it, are you all trash? You can't even handle a 6-year-old child? Sorry to disappoint you. Why are you on the phone with me? Where is he? Mu Wanru asked coldly. There was another long period of silence on the other end. Suddenly he said, He's been caught. What? Mu Wanru cried out in shock. An inexplicable panic quickly spread in her heart. In a remote underground warehouse on the outskirts of Beijing, Li Hanlin unlocked the chains and Yun Tianyu followed closely behind him. Just as they stepped through the door, they vaguely heard a hoarse roar. Inside the warehouse, a man was chained to a wall pillar with his hands tied behind his back. His clothes were tattered, and there were many whip marks on them. He was trembling from the excruciating pain. His body was already riddled with scars and his face was covered in blood. It was hard to distinguish his facial features, but one could vaguely make out a pair of huge eyes that were staring in despair. The man in the suit raised the whip in his hand and continued to whip him. The man was in so much pain that he was barely breathing. He couldn't even make a complete and coherent sound. Chapter 475. Under such a brutal interrogation, the man's mouth was still sealed tightly, and he didn't spit out half a truth. Under the dim light, Yun Tianyu slowly walked to him and sized him up. Finally, he sat down on the chair Li Hanlin had brought over. He sat leisurely with his legs elegantly crossed. His thin body sank into the sofa leisurely. His delicate face was cold and indifferent. Even though he was still a child, no one could ignore the chilling aura emanating from his body. Between his brows, there was a sharp and intimidating aura. Although it was restrained, it could not hide the untamed edge as if it were born from darkness. The whipping continued. Without his command, no one would stop. At this moment, the warehouse was dark and filled with a murderous aura. Yun Tianyu lowered his eyelashes. His pair of beautiful yet cold eyes did not look at the man. He was still in his own world. However, no matter how tragically the man was being whipped, Yun Tianyu's brows remained calm and unmoved. Gradually, the man's voice stopped. Li Hanlin slowly walked to his side and whispered, Director Yun, this man is not making any sound. Yun Tianyu calmly raised his eyes and looked at the unconscious man with cold eyes. He asked coldly, Is he dead? He just fainted from the pain. Oh. He calmly nodded his head. His thin lips curled into a treacherous and cold-blooded arc. Wake him up. Li Hanlin bowed and ordered his men to bring over a bucket of salt water. Moments later, the poor man, who had finally fainted, was splashed with a bucket of salt water. The pain woke him up again. The torture continued. Just kill me. Just kill me. Yun Tianyu turned a deaf ear to the man's pleas. It was as if what was happening before him had nothing to do with him. He did not even bother to look at the man. He did not say a word until the man fainted again. Li Hanlin walked to his side and was about to ask him when he heard Yun Tianyu say, Put him on the floor. Li Hanlin placed him on the ground. Yun Tianyu slowly got up and walked to the man. He kicked him with the tip of his foot. Seeing that the man had indeed fainted, he could not help but frown. Why are you so stubborn? Looks like he's a professionally trained killer. He's very tight-lipped. I've interrogated him for so long and used so many methods, but I still couldn't pry his mouth open. Yun Tianyu glanced at the man's face and coldly said, It's him. You injured my brother's hand because of you. Yun Tianyu's lips curled into a sinister smile. You're not going to tell me, are you? All right, I'll play with him. With that, he ordered coldly, Fix his limbs to the wall. The wall? How do you fix it? The men at the side were puzzled. The wall was bare and there was no fixed place. How could he tie her up? Giving him a sidelong glance, Yun Tianyu walked over and took out a sharp dagger from his waist. Use this. Everyone shuddered. What he meant was to use the dagger to pin the man's limbs to the wall. What a ruthless method. It was truly creepy for a child to think of such a torturous method. Chapter 476. This abandoned warehouse was mostly abandoned, but the tools used for construction were still there. Very quickly, a hammer was brought over. A few men in suits helped the unconscious man up, stabilized him against the wall, spread out his limbs, aimed the nails at his wrists and ankles, and exerted force. A loud bang was heard. The man woke up again from the excruciating pain, but this time his eyes were wide open. The bone-piercing pain in his limbs caused blood to gush out of his body. His face was so red that it looked like it was about to drip blood, and his veins were about to burst. If one did not experience this pain personally, they would never understand the cruelty of it. The man struggled in a frenzy, and his voice was almost hoarse from screaming. Yun Tianyu gave him a look, and Li Hanlin immediately ordered someone to pour a bucket of cold water on him. In an instant, the man calmed down a little. He raised his head in a sorry state, only to see a delicate-looking child standing in front of him. He coldly said, "I can tell you that you will die today." The man sneered. What was there to be afraid of? When he accepted this assassination mission, he was already prepared to commit suicide if he failed. Yun Tianyu seemed to have guessed his resolve, so he coolly said, "You can either die a quick death or be played to death by me. Which one do you choose?" "Die a quick death." The man didn't even think about it as he gritted his teeth and said. Yun Tianyu smiled coldly. "All right, I can satisfy you. However, you have to tell me who ordered you to do this and who is your target." The man seemed to be mocking his naivety, as if he did not care about this child at all. He was a professionally trained assassin. Assassins accepted missions and received bounties. No matter what, they would never betray their employers. He only fell into their hands because of a miscalculation today. Seeing that he was stubborn and unwilling to reveal everything, Yun Tianyu took a piece of black cloth from Li Hanlin's hand and nonchalantly said, "Oh, okay. I'll play with you then." His laughter was still childish and had a hint of a child's childishness. It was soft and cute. However, every sentence and every word that came out of his mouth made people tremble with fear. "Gag his mouth." Li Hanlin immediately ordered someone to gag his mouth. He took a container from Li Hanlin. Inside the container were 10 finely crafted darts. He took out a dart and asked coldly, "Who ordered you to do this?" The man bit his lip hard and refused to say anything. Yun Tianyu smiled and threw the dart. He was good at darts. Because of his health, he rarely went out since he was young. When he was at home and had nothing to do, he liked to play some games. This dart was one of them. However, with his eyes blindfolded, it was hard to tell if the darts would be accurate. A muffled sound was heard. The dart went straight into the man's abdomen. The man groaned and tried to hold it in. However, in less than half a second, the expression on his face quickly cracked because of the indescribable pain. He suffocated for a moment, and his entire body convulsed. He was utterly defeated. These darts were no ordinary darts. The steel tip of the dart was stained with concentrated sulfuric acid. Chapter 477. Some of his wounds were already dripping with blood mixed with salt water. Yun Tianyu's dart had accurately pierced a wound on his abdomen. The tip of the needle was short, so the wound was not deep enough to be fatal. However, the chemical reaction of the sulfuric acid and salt water corroded the wound, causing it to emit a wisp of smoke. Only he could experience this feeling now. When some kind of pain passed, perhaps even the screams stopped. Yun Tianyu furrowed his brows and asked regretfully, "Oh my. Did I hit the target?" "Yes, you did," Li Hanlin reminded him. A cute and charming smile appeared on Yun Tianyu's face. With that, he received another dart. Yun Tianyu gestured, and the second dart was about to be thrown. "Ooh. The man immediately begged for his assistant's help in a muffled voice. Yun Tianyu had just thrown a dart, yet the man was so scared that he wet his pants. It seemed that he was afraid. After all, this pain was not something an ordinary person could endure. Even if he was a seasoned killer who had lived his life on the edge of a knife, he was never afraid. He was never afraid of death. Now, he was scared out of his wits by this 6-year-old child's means. What a joke! Was this really a 6-year-old child? The man's eyelids trembled as he struggled to open them. His vision was blurred by the blood flowing from his forehead. He blinked his eyes hard and tried to regain his vision. Finally, he could see the child's face clearly. The child wasn't tall. He wore a snow-white shirt, black overalls, and a pair of British boots. His black hair was neat, and his skin was smooth and creamy. On his snow-white face, a pair of beautiful and deep eyes were covered, but one could vaguely see that the corners of his eyes were slightly curved, and he was smiling. He had a pretty nose, cute lips, and pink and tender cheeks. His body still had the smell of milk, and he was delicate and delicate. However, his body exuded a bone-chilling aura that made one's hair stand on end. Even though his lips were curled up and his face was clearly smiling, it made people feel a sinister feeling in their hearts and made them shudder. Was this child really only 6 years old? He did not believe it. Could a 6-year-old child think of such terrible means to torture someone? What is he saying? Yun Tianyu raised his eyebrows slightly. Li Hanlin gave him a look and immediately ordered someone to remove the cloth from his mouth. Once it was removed, the man begged for mercy. "Give me a quick death. Stop it." "Oh. Do you think I'll stop just because you tell me to?" Yun Tianyu smiled innocently and tilted his head. His voice was tender, clear, and very pleasant to the ears. His words made one's heart shudder. The man's face turned white. "I'm just an assassin. I'm paid to do this, that's all. I'm just a child. I need someone to play with me. Why don't you play with me?" Yun Tianyu gave her an elegant smile. As he spoke, he raised his wrist again. The dart needle in his hand shone with a cold light. "Oh, I'll tell you." "Don't. You'll confess?" "Yun, I'll tell you everything, I'll tell you everything. I only beg you to give me a quick death." Chapter 478. Yun Tianyu's lips curled into a sinister and disdainful smile. "Let me tell you, I may be able to find out even if you don't tell me. Now that you've provoked me, you'll have to bear the consequences." Just as he finished speaking, his eyes flashed with ruthlessness. With a swift wave of his hand, he threw the dart in his hand and it pierced the man's thigh. The sulfuric acid on the tip of the needle quickly corroded the man's skin to the point where his bones were visible. The man convulsed violently as if he had been electrocuted. He struggled madly. Swish! Another dart was thrown, and it accurately pierced his eye. Warm blood splattered out. A fiery and intense glaring sensation hit him. This time, the man was completely unable to make a sound. He only convulsed like he was having a spasm. Then he let out a heart-wrenching scream. Li Hanlin, who was standing at the side, also found this scene to be extremely horrifying. He lowered his head to look at Yun Tianyu and asked with a complicated expression, "Director Yun, why don't you let your daddy settle this matter?" "Agent Li, what do you mean by that?" Yun Tianyu slowly retorted. "This is my matter, he doesn't need to settle it. But this will dirty your hands." Li Hanlin could not help feeling a little hurt. A 6-year-old child should be pure white, shouldn't he? He should not be tainted by such things, should he? Yun Tianyu's gaze was slightly distracted. "Dirty?" He sneered. His laughter was light but deep. "In order to protect Mommy, even if my hands are stained with blood, I won't hesitate." Li Hanlin was so shocked that he could not recover his senses for a long time. This sentence was bold enough. At this moment, Li Hanlin was truly impressed by him from the bottom of his heart. He did not know what kind of childhood had nurtured such a calm, courageous, and black-bellied child. On one side, he was innocent and adorable. On the other, he was dark and ruthless. He did not have the weakness and delicateness that a child should have. A normal child would be scared out of his wits if something like this happened, but he quickly regained his composure and even personally interrogated the assassin, torturing him until he begged for death. How did such a black-bellied method come about? He was very much like his father. That Muyaja was also a ruthless person. Could it really be hereditary? Yun Tianyu elegantly removed the black cloth covering his eyes. With great satisfaction, he took a few steps toward the man, who was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. "Does it hurt?" Cough. Blood gushed up, and the man coughed out a mouthful of blood. He could no longer reply. That's right. The more he hurt, the more satisfied Yun Tianyu was, the more satisfied he became. He thought of his mother's worried face. Then he thought about how Mu Yichen had been injured in order to protect him. This pain was nothing. These 3 darts were neither too much nor too little. On behalf of Mommy and Mu Yichen, they were returning them to him. You can say it now. The man trembled as he raised his head and looked at him with misty eyes. Perhaps he was in so much pain that his mind was muddled. His lips didn't move for a long time. The scariest thing for a person was to greet death helplessly. What was scarier than this was to suffer a fate worse than death. He had been in the dark for so many years, and it was not that he had never seen people with ruthless means. In terms of ruthlessness, he had never been convinced by anyone. Yun Tianyu, however, was the first person to make him feel fear from the bottom of his heart. How was this a child? Chapter 479. On the surface, he looked as innocent as an angel. In reality, he was scarier than the devil. HM? Not going to speak? The boy frowned, dissatisfied with his indifference. With both hands in his pants, he kicked the man's abdomen, causing the latter to yelp in pain. Are you mute now? I don't have the patience. This is your last chance. Don't waste my time. I'll speak, good boy. With his hands behind his back, he looked like an elegant and courteous gentleman as he casually asked, Who exactly is your target? 3 days ago, I received this mission. My employer paid me 2 million to assassinate 2 people. Which 2? One Yun Xianxia. The other, her son Yun Tianyu, who is... He raised his head and stared at him with one eye. The boy's eyes changed slightly. Even though his face remained expressionless, his heart was in turmoil. He had previously guessed that he was the target and also vaguely guessed that his mother was one of the targets. Yun Tianyu clenched his fists tightly as a frightening and sharp murderous look flashed across his adorable face. Someone actually dared to hire an assassin to assassinate his mother? ***. If not for luck, his mother's life would have been in danger that day. Thinking of this, his eyes flashed dangerously with murderous intent. Who's your employer? Haha. The man guffawed. I'm an assassin hired by someone. She pays me and I carry out her orders. It's that simple. As for my employer's identity, I shouldn't reveal it. Still, I have to give it to you. I only ask that you give me a quick death and stop torturing me. All right. I agree to this condition of yours. Like a great gift, Yun Tianyu agreed to his request. Tell me, who is that person? The man's lips trembled as he answered, Mu Wanru. Mu Wanru? His brows furrowed slightly, clearly unfamiliar with this name. Li Hanlin was stunned for a moment before asking in surprise, Why is it her? You know her? He raised his head and narrowed his eyes dangerously. I'll explain her identity to you in detail, Li Hanlin said. He turned to look at the man and asked coldly, Why does she want to kill me? Of course, she didn't tell me the specific reason. I only know that she said that you are an evil creature and must be eliminated. Otherwise, it will threaten her position. The man endured the pain and opened his mouth with difficulty. Have no choice but to get rid of them? Yun Tianyu quickly sensed that there was a hidden meaning in her words. The man coughed a few times. A trace of blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth. He slowly said, 6 years ago, Yun Xianxia gave birth to 2 children for the Mu family. One of the children was confirmed to have died at birth. Therefore, everyone thought that the child no longer existed in this world. However, Grandpa Mu somehow got the news that the child was still alive. Naturally, he would want the child to return to the family. Yun Tianyu narrowed his eyes. He suddenly approached the man and interrogated, What else do you know? Tell me everything. Chapter 480. He was an assassin. After accepting a mission, he would investigate the identity of the employer to the best of his ability. His information on Mu Wanru was limited, though. This was all he knew. Yun Tianyu blinked his eyes slowly and his lips curled into a strange smile. Rest in peace. After saying that, he turned around without looking back and elegantly walked out of the warehouse. The moment the door closed, a gunshot was heard, breaking the tranquil night. When Li Hanlin came out, Yun Tianyu was sitting in the car, deep in thought. Have you dealt with everything? Li Hanlin nodded. Yes. Let's go. In the car, Yun Tianyu sat leisurely in the back seat. He rested his chin elegantly on one hand and looked out the window indifferently. Li Hanlin, who was sitting beside him, gave him a rough analysis of Mu Wanru's information. However, due to the limited information he had, he could not deduce Mu Wanru's motive for hiring an assassin. Yun Tianyu only said, "It's not that simple. You have 5 days to investigate everything about Mu Wanru, no matter how big or small." Understood, Li Hanlin replied swiftly. At the same time, in the Mu residence. In the study room, Mu Yaja sat at his desk and flipped through a thick stack of documents with his head lowered. Min Yu, who was behind him, quietly waited and carefully observed his expression. That's all. Sir, all the information on Leji Holdings is here. Mu Yaja raised his eyes and furrowed his brows slightly. Since Xiao Yichen was injured, he naturally wanted to find out what had happened at the amusement park. However, due to the shooting incident, Fairy Tale Valley closed 3 hours in advance and evacuated all the visitors. They showed a perfect public relations attitude toward the media's interception of interviews, but they refused to talk about what had happened that day, even in the face of the public's doubts. The shooting incident was definitely a fatal blow to a public amusement park like the amusement park. Under normal circumstances, the media and the police would have already investigated this matter. But until now, the news about the shooting incident had been tightly sealed. Even the media could not intervene, so there were no reports. On the internet, some visitors posted on the forum. However, not long after these posts were posted, they were quickly deleted. Their accounts were also banned or even banned. Min Yu investigated in secret, but due to Fairy Tale Valley's strict confidentiality measures, he didn't leak any information. He only vaguely found out that there was an attack on that day. As for the details of the incident, he did not know. Fairy Tale Valley was jointly controlled by Leji Holdings and E Group. This and E Group didn't have a strong background, but Cola Wisdom had a strong background. Leji Holdings used to be a toy supplier on the verge of bankruptcy until it was acquired by Hurricane Group a year ago. The board of directors was replaced, shares were divided, and the CEO was replaced. In a short period of time, they had rapidly risen to become the world-class DreamWorks Animation, the world's largest toy supplier. Their industrial chains were spread across North America, Europe, and Asia. However, the CEO who held 60% of the company's shares had a mysterious background. A toy supplier might not be surprising. However, the Hurricane Group behind them was not to be trifled with. Chapter 481. They controlled half of the world's arms market and had close ties with various governments, mafia, and terrorist organizations. Their influence spanned across both the legal and illegal worlds, and they had an impressive mercenary corps. Perhaps, this was not an intuitive feeling. In other words, Hurricane Group controlled 50% of the world's arms market. Out of every 100 guns in the world, 50 of them were produced by this group. Every war in the world required the signing of tens of billions worth of arms orders from the Hurricane Group's armory. It could be said that this arms group was so powerful that everyone feared it. Dishing Financial Group was powerful, but its business was huge. The Muse did not rely solely on clean means to reach where they were today. The power struggles behind them were intertwined. At a certain point, if they wanted to expand their influence, they would naturally involve the underworld. There were 2 big families in the capital. One of them was the Gu family, and the other, needless to say, was the Mu family. This Hurricane Group was not just a simple underworld organization, though. Every move of theirs could affect the world's situation. How could a toy company have a connection with such a huge arms group, though? I heard that the mysterious CEO of Leji Holdings is very young. After Hurricane Group acquired the company, he took over the board of directors. I feel that his background is not simple. He should be related to Hurricane Group in countless ways. Minyu said from the side. Mu Yaja frowned as he fiddled with the pen in his hand. Minyu, who was standing at the side, said with lingering fear, if word of the shooting incident at the amusement park gets out, Leji's reputation will surely suffer a devastating blow. Now that the news is sealed, even the police can't intervene. A toy company can't possibly have such power. Mu Yaja casually flipped through the documents. His gaze paused on a column of information. Liji Holdings Board of Directors, Li Hanlin. His gaze changed as the man's face flashed across his mind. This man had once appeared in Yun Tianyou's ward and claimed to be the principal of Yun Tianyou's kindergarten. He had also met him at Fairy Tale Valley that day. He was one of the higher-ups there. Back then, he was in a hurry and did not react in time. Now that he thought about it, he suddenly felt that something was amiss. Since he was one of the higher-ups in Liji Holdings, then Mu Yaja's gaze deepened. Who is this Li Hanlin? He is the highest-ranking director of Liji Holdings. He has a lot of power. Mu Yaja's heart skipped a beat as a suspicion suddenly arose in his heart. Even he couldn't help but be startled. He had some bold guesses about Yun Tianyou's identity. By the time Yun Tianyou reached home, the sky was already turning bright. It was close to dawn. He tiptoed around the entrance and carefully walked into the living room. Suddenly, the lights in the living room lit up. He was startled and stood rooted to the ground. "Where did you go?" On the sofa, Yun Xianxia looked at him angrily, as if she hadn't slept all night. Her face was tired, and her eyes were bloodshot. Chapter 482. Waiting for you. Yun Xianxia's voice was frosty. His coquetry seemed to have lost its effect at this moment. She asked angrily, "Where did you go?" "I went for a walk in the courtyard." Yun Tianyou pinched the corner of his shirt uneasily. Like a child who had done something wrong, he was at a loss for what to do and trembled with fear. In fact, he had indeed done something wrong. Yun Xianxia coldly said, "I went to the courtyard to look for you, but I couldn't find you." "You, why did you lie to Mommy?" "Mommy?" He was startled. He did not know when she realized that he was not around, nor did he know how long she had been waiting for him. When he left the house, he was very careful not to make any noise. He only left the house after ensuring that Yun Xianxia was asleep. When did she find out? Yun Xianxia stared at him unblinkingly. Her face was filled with anger and sadness. Not long after he left, she woke up with a start. She got up and went to his room to check if he was sleeping well, but when she turned on the light, the person on the bed was gone. She was scared out of her wits, but she did not dare to alarm Yun Yecheng. She searched everywhere by herself and even went to the security room to check the surveillance footage. Only then did she realize that he had gotten into a car and left. Seeing that he got into the car casually without being dragged or struggling, she ruled out the possibility of him being kidnapped. She also noted down the car plate number, but since it was late at night, she thought that, given Yu Yu's character, he might be afraid that she would be worried and would return before dawn. Thus, she waited patiently in the living room. Yun Tianyou looked at her guiltily. Seeing her haggard and uneasy face, he nervously explained, "Mommy, don't worry. You didn't do anything bad. You was just..." He could not think of a reasonable explanation no matter how hard he thought about it. It was impossible for him to tell her the truth, too. He didn't even dare to confess his current identity to his mother. How could he dare to talk about what happened tonight? "Yu, do you know that Mommy is worried about you?" Yun Xianxia saw that he couldn't speak and knew that he wouldn't tell her the truth. She crouched down and put her arms around his shoulders. She was still traumatized by the attack at the amusement park. She was really afraid that something would happen to Yu again. "Mommy, Yu made you worry. But Yu swears to you that Yu will never do anything to hurt Mommy. Mommy, don't worry. Trust in Yu, okay?" If he was given a little more time, he would definitely find a chance to clear things up with her. But now, he couldn't. Yun Xianxia looked at him. "Is that a promise?" "It's a deal. Today is the last time, there won't be a next time." Yun Tianyou hugged Yun Xianxia's face and gave her a peck as he consoled her. "Mommy, Yu wants to keep what happened today a secret, I can't tell you. When the time is right, Yu will come clean with Mommy. Mommy, give Yu some time, okay?" Yun Xianxia was tickled by Yun Tianyou's serious expression. How could he still say that the time was right? "Alright. Mommy is relieved to see that you are safe and sound. But today is the last time, there won't be a next time." Yun Xianxia warned him unhappily. Chapter 483. After all, Yu was different from other children. He had his own way of thinking. Hence, she carried Yu into the bedroom. As usual, Yun Shirshir lay on the bed and read him a fairy tale. Yun Tianyu snuggled softly in her arms and fell asleep peacefully as he listened to her gentle voice. Yun Shirshir specially applied for leave to accompany Yu for a few days. She also brought him and Yun Yecheng on a vacation for a few days. It was peaceful for a few days. When she returned to the training class, Qin Zhou informed her that she could successfully graduate early due to the movie schedule. The morning passed peacefully. It was not until noon that an uninvited guest arrived. It was Qian Xiaohua, whom she had met at the restaurant some time ago. In the office, Yun Shirshir saw him and subconsciously wanted to leave. Qian Xiaohua was not going to let her off so easily. He hurriedly blocked her way at the door with a pleading look on his face. Miss Yun, please don't misunderstand. I'm not here to have any improper thoughts about you. It's just that I need your help with something. You have to help me." Yun Shirshir did not let down her guard as she eyed him warily. He knew that he must have left a bad impression on her previously, so he bowed deeply to apologize. "Miss Yun, please forgive me for my rudeness and offense last time. I know that I'm in the wrong. I hope that you won't stoop to my level and won't stoop to my level. I'm very regretful after the incident. I'm a pervert. Anyway, I can only apologize to you for what happened last time. Also, I'll try my best to make it up to you. However, there's something that I need your help with." "I don't understand what you mean. Before that, can I ask for your forgiveness?" Qian Xiaohua raised his head and looked at her with a face full of remorse. It looked like he was truly remorseful. Last time, she was still so arrogant. Why did she lower her head and beg for forgiveness this time? However, Yun Shirshir didn't intend to argue with this kind of person, so she said, "Let bygones be bygones. I forgive you." "Thank you," Qian Xiaohua said gratefully. Then he told her the whole story. It turned out that some time ago, Qian Xiaohua had taken a fancy to a piece of land in the new district, so he bought it and planned to develop it into a high-class apartment building. The investments and whatnot had already been settled. The reason he chose that place was because of Disheng. Not long ago, the real estate company under Disheng Financial Group had bought a large piece of land in the new district. Qian Xiaohua had secretly asked around and found out that this piece of land was going to be a development project. He had heard that Mu Yaja was going to develop the new district into an economic district. Not only would he set up a new branch there, but he would also vigorously develop a green ecological garden. After that, he would cooperate with a famous tourism holding company in the capital to build a 5A grade amusement park. Upon hearing about Disheng Financial Group's move, many companies were tempted. The land in the new district started to be auctioned at high prices. Therefore, the remaining land was quickly divided up, and the price of the land continued to soar. Chapter 484. Soon after, schools, hospitals, cinemas, opera houses, stadiums, amusement parks, eco-parks, natural sceneries, supermarkets, and Wansheng department store would be built. Due to Disheng Financial Group's influence, the subway and public transport companies gave them the green light after they found out about it and opened up a few routes. Therefore, the originally remote suburbs suddenly became a bustling area. In the future, it might even become a commercial and financial center. Qian Xiaohua was naturally a smart man. Seeing that Disheng valued this project so much, he rubbed his palms together and started working on it. The property prices had already skyrocketed before the market had even started. If nothing went wrong, he could make a lot of money from this project. Although he did not have much of a philosophy when it came to real estate, he had the keen sense of a businessman and a unique vision. He believed in Disheng's ability and vision, so he was waiting to make a fortune. However, because of this incident, Chairman Mu was unhappy and displeased. This was bad. Disheng Financial Group announced through the media that the planning of the new district was temporarily suspended and all development projects were temporarily terminated. Disheng Financial Group's announcement caused the other investors to stop in their tracks. This was not a loss to Disheng. After all, Disheng was the one who bought the land. They could develop it whenever they wanted, regardless of whether it was sooner or later. Even if it was vacant for a year or two, Dishing would not care about the loss. However, it was different for Xianxia. For the sake of this case, he had taken out all of his personal belongings, and even risked his own net worth to finance it. He thought that nothing would go wrong if he followed Dishing, and the profits would be enough to make a fortune. However, he did not expect that Dishing's project would be suspended just like that. His building project was already halfway done. If Dishing suspended the project for a few months, the loss would be acceptable. However, if it was suspended for a year or two, he would lose a lot of money. If Mu Yaja deliberately went against him, he would be reduced to bankruptcy. After all, the value of this area lay in Dishing's intention to develop it into a bustling new district. Without Dishing, the value of the property here would plummet. However, Xianxia thought that Mu Yaja would not be so ruthless just for a woman, right? He calmed himself down and planned to check the news later. When Xianxia found out that Dishing Financial Group was planning to develop this place into an industrial zone, he could not sit still any longer. Mu Yaja's move was too merciless and ruthless. Knowing that he was going to develop a residential area, why did he do this on purpose? If it were to be developed into an industrial park, it would be impossible for Dishing to even think about it. However, if it were to be developed into an industrial park, Xianxia's development would only result in a huge loss. Who would buy a house next to an industrial park? Who would want to live in a place with such a high air pollution index? On the surface, it was not targeted. However, in reality, Mu Yaja's casual wave of his hand had completely pushed him into a dead end. Xianxia could not sit still any longer. He tried to go to Mu Yaja several times to plead for mercy, but Mu Yaja completely ignored him. Chapter 485. This time, Xianxia was panicking. What should he do? The project was still in progress. Every day that it was delayed was a loss. Xianxia was indifferent to his repeated pleas. She only said mildly, "If you're here to beg for my forgiveness, I can forgive you. But you want me to plead with Mu Yaja for you? That's impossible." But Xianxia exclaimed and probed carefully, "Could it be that Miss Yun thinks that I'm not sincere enough?" Xianxia said with a headache, "Mu Yaja and I don't have that kind of relationship. My words don't carry any weight with him. You think too highly of me." With that said, she was about to leave. However, Xianxia was so shocked that he hugged her. Seeing her cold and silent expression, he was so anxious that he was about to cry. He begged for mercy. Oh, my little grandaunt. You don't carry any weight in Chairman Mu's heart? You must be joking with me. Why did Chairman Mu force me into a corner? Isn't it because I have improper thoughts about you? I deserve to die for bringing this up. I deserve to die. Xianxia slapped himself and said, "Chairman Mu really cares about you. Believe me, as long as you say something, you can save me from the abyss of suffering. I beg you." "Boss Qian, there's no point in saying more. I don't think I have the ability to change Chairman Mu's mind." With that said, Xianxia walked around him and left. Xianxia stomped his feet anxiously behind her. Xianxia originally thought that after rejecting him, he would restrain himself. However, she didn't expect that Xianxia would follow behind her for 2 consecutive days. No matter where she went, he would always follow behind her like a shadow. On the way home, she saw a car following closely behind her in the rearview mirror. She didn't need to guess to know that Xianxia was following her. Xianxia was annoyed by him and got out of the car. The car behind them also stopped on the road. Xianxia got out of the car. Before Xianxia could say anything, he rushed in front of her and knelt down with a plop. Xianxia was stunned. Xianxia said solemnly, "Miss Yun, I beg you. This is the last time. Please help me. As long as you plead with Chairman Mu for me, I won't pester you anymore no matter what the outcome is." Xianxia was also annoyed by his torture, so she said, "Okay, I promise you, but don't follow me anymore." Xianxia was so moved that he shed tears of gratitude. He wanted nothing more than to kneel on the ground and kowtow to her. Xianxia said helplessly, "Don't be like this, get up. I'm going home, so don't follow me anymore." It was already 8 o'clock when they reached home. The moment she opened the door, Yun Tianyu, who was reading a book on the sofa, happily welcomed her and threw himself into her arms. Mommy, you're back. Yu has been waiting for you for a long time. Yun Xianxia rubbed his head guiltily, unable to hide her tiredness. I'm sorry, Yu. I came back a little late today. You're wrong. Mommy comes back late every day. With that, he tiptoed and took the coat and bag from her. As he put them aside, he said, Mommy, the food is ready, but it seems to have turned cold again. I'll go heat it up again. It'll be ready soon. After waiting for a long time, she still did not return. The food was reheated, but it still turned cold. Yun Xianxia sat at the table and looked at the 3 dishes and 1 soup on the table. It was not a sumptuous meal, but it looked, smelled, and tasted good. She could not help feeling touched. Chapter 486. Yun Tianyu, who was sitting opposite her, propped his head in his hands and looked at her with satisfaction. No, it's not. Yu is happy as long as Mommy thinks it's delicious. Yu's cooking is the best. It's even better than a 5-star chef's. Yun Xianxia gave him a thumbs up and was not stingy with her praises for her baby. Yu's pink and tender face revealed a hint of sweetness as he hurriedly urged, Mommy, hurry up and eat. What if the food gets cold again? But Yun Xianxia picked up her bowl of rice and ate happily with the reheated food. Yun Tianyu looked at her quietly. His eyes darted around before he suddenly lowered his voice and asked, Mommy, Yu has a question for you. HM? That man from yesterday, the man Mommy said was your university professor. Who exactly is he? Yun Xianxia had just swallowed a mouthful of rice when she heard his question. She choked for a long time. Yu kindly pushed a bowl of soup in front of her. Yun Xianxia hurriedly gulped down a few mouthfuls. Yu, who was at the side, lamented helplessly, Mommy, your table manners are so ugly. Yun Xianxia glared at him resentfully. Are you saying that Mommy's table manners are ugly? Yes, not ladylike at all. Mommy, you can't do this outside, or else you'll scare others. Baby is already used to your table manners, so don't worry. Yu looked at her with a, I can't do anything to you expression. What's so important about it? Yun Xianxia, on the other hand, did not think much of it. She was merely shocked by his words and choked on her words. Don't avoid the topic. Every time I ask you a question, you're always evasive. Mommy, don't coax me like a child, I'm not that stupid. Yun Tianyu could tell at a glance that she was avoiding the topic. This time, he did not intend to let her off. When did I avoid the topic? Then, you tell me, who is that uncle? Yun Tianyu, with an elegant smile on his face, unhurriedly asked this question, leaving her with no way out. Yun Xianxia sighed helplessly. She put down her bowl and chopsticks and looked up at him. I'm sorry, Mommy lied to you last time. He's not Mommy's university professor. Oh, I know. Yu raised her eyebrows. You know? Then last time you... Mommy, sometimes your IQ is really low. I was just playing along with you. Don't I look at myself in the mirror? Yu looked defeated. In other words, the little girl could tell that the man's facial features were similar to hers. Yun Tianyu was long aware of his relationship with Mu Yaja. But now, he was only asking because he wanted his mommy to be honest with him. He didn't want her to hide anything from him. Is your daddy? Yun Xianxia cautiously said this. After saying this, she observed Yun Tianyu's expression. Seeing that he was still calm and did not look surprised, she was a little surprised. Why don't you look surprised at all? Why should I be surprised? Yun Tianyu held his head and calmly said, I also know that the uncle's name is Mu Yaja. He's Dishing Financial Group CEO. Also, Yu moved closer to her and nudged her waist with his small arm. This uncle likes you a lot. Chapter 487. You're just a child. What do you know about liking someone? Of course I know. Mommy, you're so out of date. You're already dating in primary school. You're already dating in primary school. Mommy, you're really getting on in years. You're about to be out of touch with this era. Getting on in years. These words were like an arrow that pierced her heart. Yun Xianxia stared at him dangerously. Do you think Mommy is old? Yu shrugged and looked at her with a magnanimous expression. Then he patted her shoulder solemnly. Don't worry, Mommy. No matter how old you are, to the point where you don't have any teeth and your hair is white, you won't despise you. Xianxia was a little touched when she heard this. She held his smiling face and kissed him twice. Good boy, don't despise Mommy. Mommy loves you the most. Yu suddenly hugged her shoulder. His childish voice was full of tenderness. Mommy, do you know? Yu is very possessive of Mommy. He doesn't want anyone to steal Mommy from Yu. However, if it's a man that Mommy likes, Yu only wants Mommy to be happy, regardless of Mommy's choice. That's enough. Even though he was still a little repulsed by Wuxia, he saw the sad expression on Mommy's face yesterday. It must be because of that man. He didn't know the reason, but he knew that if she didn't have feelings for someone, why would she be sad because of that person? Mommy clearly had feelings for him. Since that was the case, he wouldn't force his will on Xianxia. No matter what choice she made, he would support her unconditionally. Because she was his favorite Mommy. Xianxia's gaze softened. She hugged his shoulders and stroked his head. She smiled and said, You're such a good boy. No matter what, you must remember that Mommy will always love you the most. But Mommy, if anyone bullies you, you must tell Yu. Yu will bully them back. Yu raised her head and gently planted a kiss on her Mommy's cheek. Her beautiful eyes were filled with a doting smile. Xianxia's heart stirred. Sometimes, it really gave her an illusion. Although Yu was her son, he doted on her as much as anyone else. Yu, aren't you afraid of spoiling Mommy too much? Xianxia asked with a smile. Yu's pink lips pursed in disapproval. What are you talking about? Isn't it natural for a son to dote on his Mommy? When you grow up, people will definitely say that you're a Mommy's boy. Let them say what they want. Yu snorted disdainfully with an arrogant look on his face. Do I, Yu, need to care about anyone's opinion? You're so full of yourself. Xianxia tousled his silky hair. Yu nestled in his mother's embrace with a look of contentment. Xianxia suddenly asked seriously, Yu, sometimes Mommy wonders whose genes you've inherited. He was clever and quick-witted. He was smart and warm, but sometimes he could be a little sharp-tongued. He was simply quick-witted. Yu answered matter-of-factly, Of course, I've inherited it from my dearest Mommy. Mommy is so beautiful. Although she's dumb, she has Yu. Yu is smart. Chapter 488. Yu actually despises Mommy for being stupid. Mommy is so sad. Woo. Yu repeatedly begged for mercy. Be gentler. Xianxia refused to let him off and threatened, quickly praise Mommy for being smart. Mommy is so smart. What else? Mommy is a beautiful fairy. More. Mommy is the most gentle Mommy in the world. Yu cleverly praised her. Xianxia finally let him off. She could not help poking his head with her finger. You're smart. I am Mommy quickly. You, go collect the clothes. Yours. He then got off her body and ran to the balcony to collect the clothes. Xianxia held her chopsticks in satisfaction. She sighed inwardly. With such a filial son at home, everything is fine. Thinking about it, she felt a little ashamed. Thus, after dinner, Xianxia carried the bowls to the kitchen to wash them. Yu kept the clothes in the wardrobe and went to the kitchen. He obediently carried a stool over and stood beside Xianxia. Mommy, let's wash them together. Okay. You're in charge of washing the dishes, and I'll be in charge of wiping them. We'll split the work. Okay. Thus, the mother-son pair chatted in the kitchen while washing the dishes. It was extremely comfortable. After washing the dishes, the two nestled on the sofa and watched TV for a while. Yu suddenly thought of the movie and asked curiously, Mommy, when will the movie you're acting in start shooting? The day after tomorrow. Xianxia thought for a while. The opening ceremony will be held at Jinghua University. Yu, can I go? No, you have classes. Xianxia rejected him without thinking. Mommy is bad. You still have school tomorrow. Let's sleep. Xianxia turned off the TV and carried him into the room. She carried him to the bed. Yun Tianyou's little face still had an aggrieved expression. His lips were pursed, and he was clearly unhappy. Darling, Mommy has to work. I'm afraid I can't take care of you. Mommy will be worried. Yun Xianxia said somewhat helplessly. Alright. Then you can go to school obediently. Although Yu was still a little unwilling, there was nothing she could do. She slowly crawled under the blanket, looking depressed. He really wanted to accompany his mommy. Otherwise, he would feel uneasy. He thought that he should just confess everything to Mommy and not let her go to work. He could just let her stay at home and take care of her. Otherwise, when he went out to work, he would be looked down upon and ostracized. Even if he was wronged outside, he would never tell him. He would be worried. In a place like the entertainment industry, there was so much intrigue. How could he be at ease? However, when he thought about it, there were some things that he really did not know how to tell her. Thus he swallowed this impulse. Yun Xianxia saw the disappointment on his face. She gently kissed his pouting lips and comforted him. Don't think too much. Good night, darling. Yu's face looked better at this. Good night, Mommy. Have a good dream. She turned off the lights and closed the door. Yun Xianxia returned to her room and lay on the bed. However, she could not fall asleep no matter how hard she tried. Her phone suddenly rang. Yun Xianxia picked it up and saw Mu Yaja's number on the screen. She was startled. She suddenly recalled the scene she had coincidentally seen at the hospital that day. Even now, her heart still felt stifled. Feeling vexed, she tapped the screen and hung up the call. Chapter 489. However, as if he was competing with her, her phone kept ringing. When she hung up, he would call again and again. She was thoroughly enraged. She picked up the call and asked angrily, "What exactly do you want? Come out." The man's voice was filled with anger after being hung up on more than 20 times. Yun Xianxia was perplexed and asked unhappily, "It's the middle of the night. Why are you acting crazy?" "I'm outside your house." Yun Xianxia was shocked. She walked to the window and saw an Aston Martin parked outside. Mu Yaja was holding his phone and leaning against the car with a cigarette in his mouth. The flickering sparks were particularly eye-catching in the night. From afar, the man's head was lowered, and his entire body exuded an inexplicable loneliness. She didn't know why, but today's man was no longer as high-spirited as he used to be. At this moment, he seemed somewhat depressed, which inexplicably pierced her heart. Yun Xianxia hung up the phone and returned to bed. This time, her phone didn't ring again, which made her confused. Could it be that he had left? Feeling inexplicably uneasy, she got out of bed and walked to the window. Lifting a corner of the curtains, she peered through the window, only to see that the man was still in the same position as before. His cigarette, however, had reached its end. He snuffed it out and lit another one. Tonight, he seemed to be inexplicably distracted. He smoked one cigarette after another, almost without stopping. Taking a deep puff of his cigarette, he raised his head and looked in her direction. Yun Xianxia put down the curtains and her heart was beating fast. After hesitating for a bit, she put on a coat and walked out. It was late at night and the night wind was cold. She stood uneasily at the door. She gently gathered her clothes and looked at the man leaning against the front of the car. There was a long period of silence between them. After what seemed like a century, Yun Xianxia finally opened her mouth to speak. "Why you here?" Mu Yaja stared at her face. His gaze was as deep as a torrent, but he still did not speak. "Don't say anything. I'm going back," Yun Xianxia said angrily. She turned around and was about to enter the house. "Stop right there." The man's voice came from behind. Yun Xianxia stopped, but she didn't turn around. Mu Yaja straightened his body, put out his cigarette and said, "Come here and give me a hug." Yun Xianxia's back stiffened. She turned around, but she didn't walk toward him. What did that mean? He had appeared at her doorstep out of nowhere and looked so fragile. Was he upset just to get a hug from her? "You, come here and give me a hug," Mu Yaja said again, but there was a hint of compromise. 5 minutes. Yun Xianxia hesitated for a long time, but she still walked over in the end. When she walked in front of him, Mu Yaja reached out and pulled her into his arms, hugging her fiercely. His arms kept tightening as if he wanted to melt her into his bones and blood. It almost suffocated her. Feeling a little uncomfortable, she struggled for a bit. The man's voice came from above her head. Don't move. Wuxia. Chapter 490. Yun Shirshir looked up, only to see his handsome face closing in on hers. His thin lips sealed her mouth in an instant, and her protest was forcefully silenced. Tonight, for some reason, he was a little out of control, like an injured beast. It was probably because today was the anniversary of Jiang Yishan's death. After leaving the cemetery, he had been feeling a little frustrated. At night, he had driven up the mountain to vent his emotions, but after leaving the mountain, he had driven the car here. When he came to his senses, the car had already stopped in front of her house, and the engine had been turned off. Only then did he realize that perhaps this woman had unknowingly invaded every corner of his thoughts. He wanted to see her, but his usual arrogance did not allow him to lower his head to a woman. For the past few days, he had forced himself to throw himself into the company's huge pile of cases. He did not want to think about her or have any distracting thoughts. However, every time he closed his eyes, her face would appear in his mind. There was no way to avoid it. He had been waiting for her to come to him and lower her head to him, but this woman seemed to have disappeared from his world without a trace. When he had driven the car here involuntarily, he had realized that he had lost. In the end, he still could not hold himself back and wanted to see her. As he thought of this, his eyes darkened. Before she could even react, a domineering kiss filled her entire mouth. Yun Shirshir was shocked. He kissed her fiercely and with so much force that it was as if he wanted to swallow her whole. His cold, thin lips pressed tightly against hers, crushing her. He kissed her so hard that it hurt her. Taking advantage of this, he pried open her lips and kissed her even more deeply. Yun Shirshir struggled for a while and tried to push him away, but she could not resist the man's strength at all. The kiss was deep. It almost suffocated her. Just as she thought that she was going to faint, he raised his head and pinched her chin. Admiring her lips, which were swollen from being ravaged, he lifted her hair with his slender fingers. His gaze, however, froze. Where's the earring? Yun Shirshir's breathing quickened as she looked up. Seeing his gloomy and unhappy gaze, she said coldly, Take it off. Why did you pluck it? Wuxia asked angrily. Because I don't like it, I took it off. Can't I? Yun Shirshir felt that he was a little strange and turned to leave. Wuxia grabbed her arm and pulled her back. Yun Shirshir lost her balance and bumped into the car door. Wuxia followed closely behind her. His tall and big body covered hers, trapping her in this narrow space. Yun Shirshir looked up helplessly, only to see him lowering his head and glaring at her. The anger in his eyes almost stabbed her. What do you want? Are you still angry? Wuxia suddenly asked. Yun Shirshir was distracted for a moment and turned her face away from him. I don't know what you're talking about. Xianxia, Wuxia suddenly said, her name is Xianxia, and she's my cousin. So, there's nothing between us. If you're misunderstanding this, then I'll tell you now that there's no need. Chapter 491. It was only because she resembled his mother's face that he doted on her so much. If she minded because of this, then there was no need for her to do so. Yun Shirshir was stunned for a moment. Was this man trying to explain things to her? Cousin, though? Are they cousins? Why did she see the adoration in Xianxia's eyes when she looked at him, though? It was the kind of adoration that only a woman would show to a man she admired. He claimed that they were cousins, but did he not know what this so-called cousin of his had in mind for him? Yun Shirshir sneered. Why should I be angry? Her disdainful attitude had infuriated him. Suppressing his urge to flare up, Wuxia asked in a low voice, Do you really mind this? Yun Shirshir kept quiet. Wuxia said, If you mind, then I'll keep my distance from her. He was making a huge concession. Yun Shirshir's lips twitched, but she said slowly, I don't have the right for you to do that for me. You do. Wuxia corrected her angrily. I don't. D***. He grabbed her chin, lowered his head, and fiercely bit her lips. He loved and hated this woman at the same time. He hated her for acting on her own initiative. What did she mean by not having the right? If he said she had it, then she had it. Yun Shirshir pushed his chest in pain, only to hear the man say angrily, "If I say you have the right, then you have the right." Muyaja, aren't you being too self-righteous? Do you think I really mind this? Yun Shirshir's eyes were cold and flickering. Even if I mind, what right do I have? Then tell me, what right do I have? The man looked at her silently. Yun Shirshir sneered. What right do I have to mind this? You're my woman. That's your right. Mu Yaja announced domineeringly. Yun Shirshir was stunned for a moment, then she suddenly asked in amusement, I'm your woman. Do you dare to announce our relationship to the whole world? Mu Yaja's gaze froze, and his face instantly sank. Yun Shirshir looked at his stunned expression and her heart sank. See, the relationship between them can't be exposed at all. What she wanted was a stable life and a happy marriage. She didn't want something like this to be shameful. She was not a third party, and she would not be a third party. Even if he didn't have any feelings for his fiancée, she wouldn't tolerate playing the role of a backstabber. Thinking of this, she coldly tugged at the corner of her lips. Look, you can't even do this. Muyaja, please know your place and don't provoke me again. If that's what you want. Muyaja paused, then his lips curled into an evil and arrogant smile. Yun Shirshir, I'll make you my real woman. Yun Shirshir was stunned, and her eyes widened in astonishment. It was a little unbelievable. I'll announce to the whole world that you're Mu Yaja's woman. Wait until the time is right. Now that the Mu family's internal strife and power struggles were intertwined, old Master Mu's health was deteriorating, and the change of power in the Mu family was imminent. She was afraid that some people could no longer hold back and were ready to make a move. Chapter 492. Wait until he becomes the real head of the Mujia. Wait until he takes over the Mujia's position. Wait until he eradicates the remaining forces of the Mujia. Wait until that day, he will announce to the world that Yun Shirshir is his woman. This is his promise to her. Does he mean that he will give her a home? Yun Shirshir's nose suddenly turned sour. She always felt that happiness was somewhat unattainable. Even in the eyes of ordinary people, having a complete family in her eyes was such a distant thing. But this man told her that one day, she will be his real woman. Famous and famous. Is that what he meant? Will there be such a day? Yun Shirshir still didn't believe it. Mu Yaja somewhat angrily said, Woman, are you doubting me? Yun Shirshir looked at him with a somewhat empty gaze. Her face instantly lost all expression. Looking at her, Mu Yaja's heart seemed to be ruthlessly stabbed by a needle. Mu Yaja, answer me, do you like me? Yun Shirshir stared at his face and asked word by word. Mu Yaja was silent for a moment. He was a little unclear about the definition of like. He had never had a woman before, and no matter how one looked at it, Yun Shirshir was his first woman. He had always been arrogant and casual, like a free wind, never willing to be bound. But ever since this woman broke into his world, all the order seemed to have collapsed in an instant. He also began to get used to her warmth when he woke up. Without her, he felt a little unaccustomed. For her, he was so possessive. He didn't like other men to look at her, touch her, and only wanted her to belong to him. He also missed her when she wasn't by his side. He missed her like a madman. He missed her eyes, her tightly knitted brows when she was pouting coquettishly. He missed her shy appearance under his body. What he missed even more was her sleeping peacefully in his arms. If this meant that he liked her, then so be it. However, to him, these two words were too embarrassing to say out loud. Thus, he lowered his head and gave her a gentle kiss as a response. This kiss was unlike the previous stormy kiss. The man only gently touched her lips, like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. It was as if she was the most precious treasure in the world, carefully held in the palm of his hand. Gradually, Yun Shirshir also slowly responded to his kiss. Her arms slowly wrapped around his shoulders. Although she was a little clumsy, she took the initiative to respond. Mu Yaja was very satisfied. He hugged her tightly and deepened the kiss. The two people who were immersed in it did not realize that behind them, there was a thin figure standing behind a window. Yun Tianyu, in his pajamas, stood sideways in front of the window. He lifted a corner of the curtain and peeped at the charming and gentle scene outside. A complicated expression surfaced on his delicate and tender face. Although he was young and didn't understand the love between adults, he could feel that his stupid mommy was in love. He could feel his mommy's love for this man. A trace of loneliness flashed across his eyes, followed by a slight tug at the corner of his mouth. His small hands clenched into fists and lightly thumped his aching chest. If, one day, his mommy told him that she loved this man deeply, then he would call him daddy without hesitation. Chapter 493. Back in bed, Yun Tianyu crawled under the covers and picked up a small and exquisite photo frame from the bedside table. It was a photo of him and his mommy at the amusement park a few days ago. Holding the photo close to his chest, he fell asleep quietly. The next morning, when Yun Xianxia woke up, she washed up and walked to the living room. Yun Tianyu had already laid out breakfast on the dining table. Her father immediately greeted her. "Xianxia, good morning." "Dad, good morning." "You, good morning." "Mommy, quickly have your breakfast." Yu pulled out a chair for her and, with a gentlemanly bow, invited her to take a seat. Yun Xianxia was tickled by his gentlemanly gesture and sat down. Yun Tianyu sat beside her and smilingly asked, "Mommy, did you sleep well last night?" Yun Xianxia was stunned. Recalling the kiss last night, she blushed and replied, "Yes. I had a good dream." Yu smiled. "That's great. Yu, though, had a bad dream." "Nothing." "Stupid mommy, quickly have your breakfast. This is a heart-shaped poached egg that Yu made for you." With that, he placed a heart-shaped poached egg in front of her. This was meticulously prepared by Yu. "Have you had your breakfast?" "Stupid mommy, what time is it now? I'm going to report to kindergarten." Yun Tianyu complained. Little Munchkin's face was full of misery at the thought of having to face those lively and chirpy kids in the kindergarten again. He was worried to death. He felt that his IQ would plummet if he stayed in kindergarten for a few more years. Yun Yecheng told Yun Xianxia, "Xianxia, quickly go to the office after breakfast. I'll send you to kindergarten. But be careful on the road." He then left with Yu. Not long ago, Yun Xianxia bought him a car. After the company's bankruptcy, Yun Yecheng had not driven a car for a few years. After a few days of getting used to it, he was more or less familiar with it. When the car slowly drove out of the villa, a black car followed closely behind. Ever since the incident at the amusement park, Li Hanlin had specially assigned a personal bodyguard to watch over Yun Tianyu 24/7. After Yun Xianxia finished her breakfast, she rushed to the company. In the company, Lin Fengtian sat in his office. A few assistant directors stood by the side, trembling in fear and sweating profusely. Qin Zhou sat on the sofa, absent-mindedly grinding his nails. At this moment, the huge office was shrouded in a layer of low pressure. How am I supposed to do that?" Lin Fengtian slammed his palm on the table. There was an order on the table. What appeared on the screen was a series of rules and regulations regarding Yun Xianxia's movie. No kissing scenes. No sex scenes. No hugging scenes. No holding hands. Lin Fengtian glanced at it and was so angry that he almost spat blood. These were Mu Yaja's specific requirements, but just these 4 rules and regulations were enough to drive him crazy. How am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to do that? Is Chairman Mu crazy? When he brought this order to Mu Yaja to reason with him, no matter how he tried to reason with him, Mu Yaja simply said, "Do it if you want. Otherwise, get lost." Qin Zhou immediately tried to calm him down. "Director Lin, take it easy. You're still in Chairman Mu's territory. How dare you speak ill of him?" Lin Fengtian felt that he was about to have a stroke. He was not allowed to do this or that. Was he looking for a stunt double? Chapter 494. Could it be that they had to find a body double to complete the scenes of kissing and holding hands in a youth film? We have to find a body double for kissing and a hand double for holding hands. Why is it so difficult to film a movie? Qin Zhou immediately corrected him. We have to find 2. Xingzi said that he doesn't want to do kissing or holding hands with a body double. He's a clean freak, so we have to find a few body doubles for him. Lin Fengtian's blood boiled when he heard that. Bastard! He could only curse in anger. Because Mu Yaja had spoken. There was no need to worry about the budget. Huan Yu had plenty of money, so he could spend as much as he wanted. However, if any of these rules were violated, the movie would be scrapped. Qin Zhou touched his chin. He felt that the relationship between Yun Shirshir and Chairman Mu was somewhat intriguing. Who is this Yun Shirshir? Why does Chairman Mu take care of her so much? An assistant director wondered. Take care of her? Is this taking care of her? Come on. I've changed the script of the kissing scene several times, and now it's going to be ruined by 2 body doubles. Lin Fengtian felt a headache coming on. Lin Fengtian's heart ached when he thought about how only 2 body doubles were needed for his meticulously revised script. He had high hopes for Yun Shirshir and felt that this newcomer had quite a lot of potential. Perhaps after this movie was released, she would become the next Han Yuyen. No, she would definitely surpass her. After 10 years of sharpening his sword, Lin Fengtian was full of confidence in this movie. It was a big production with a big budget. With a top film team in the country, coupled with Gu Xing's huge popularity, he was even looking forward to setting a record for the movie's box office. However, Mu Yaja had given him so many restrictions that his hands and feet were tied when he unleashed them. Lin Fengtian was a little angry. What could he do? What else could he do? Who was Mu Yaja? He was the crown prince of Dishing Financial Group. Everyone in Huanyu Entertainment had to follow his orders. What was the use of his protest? Thus, Lin Fengtian cursed Mu Yaja in his heart as he hurriedly went to look for a substitute. At noon, Qin Zhou invited Yun Shirshir to have lunch in a Chinese restaurant. During the banquet, he told her about this matter. Yun Shirshir was a little surprised when she heard this. Is this all Mu Yaja's request? In her heart, while she was surprised, she also felt an inexplicable sweetness towards Mu Yaja's dominance and possessiveness. Thus, Director Lin was so angry that he almost had a stroke. Qin Zhou said. Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You're exaggerating. Shirshir, let me ask you, what is your relationship with Chairman Mu? He seems to be very interested in you. Qin Zhou was a little gossipy. Mr. Qin, even you are so nosy? In this line of work, gossiping has become second nature. The two of them chatted for a while, and the waiter served the dishes one by one. She accidentally spilled tea on her skirt. The waiter immediately turned pale with fright and apologized profusely. Sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. Forget it. It's fine. Yun Shirshir waved her hand. Fortunately, she was wearing a black skirt today, so it was not a big deal. She raised her head to acknowledge Qin Zhou and got up to go to the bathroom to clean herself up. Wanru, you don't look well recently. Did you not rest well? Chapter 495. Mu Wanru elbowed him harshly and warned him coldly, I'm warning you, don't be too intimate with me outside, lest others see us. I know. Aaron took half a step back and reluctantly kept a distance from her. He leaned against the wall and quietly watched her back. Still, he felt satisfied. Mu Wanru glared at him. She felt that provoking Aaron was her biggest mistake. This man was probably haunting her like a haunting ghost. She originally wanted to cut off all ties with him, but if she did so, she was afraid that he would reveal her secret. Hence, she unwillingly maintained their secret relationship. She would take it one step at a time. When the time was not right, she would get rid of him to prevent future trouble. Mu Wanru looked at the mirror again. Even with a thick layer of makeup covering her face, she could not hide her haggardness. These few days she was distracted and did not rest well. Ever since that phone call, she had been having nightmares and could not sleep. She had a bad feeling about this. Thinking of this, Mu Wanru's face revealed a malevolent anger. These good-for-nothings. She really could not figure it out. How could they not even deal with a 6-year-old child? A child only 6 years old, without the strength to even truss up a chicken, had actually failed the assassination. What was more frightening was that the assassin sent to carry out the mission was nowhere to be found. Initially, she was worried that her plan had been exposed, but after not hearing any news for a few days, she still felt uneasy. Now that she had failed this time, she could only come up with another plan. She was afraid that this failure would alert the enemy, and it would be difficult to strike again in the future. There was a reason why she was anxious to get rid of Yun Xianxia and Yun Tianyu. Grandpa Mu's health was deteriorating by the day, so he paid more attention to the matter of the Mu bloodline returning to the family. She had nothing to fear from Yun Tianyu. He was just a child with an immature mind. How much of a threat could he pose to her? She didn't care at all. However, the mother-son relationship between Yun Tianyu and Yun Xianxia was deep. If Yun Tianyu was acknowledged as a member of the Mu family, would Yun Xianxia not be entangled with the Mu family? If she were to be careless and expose her identity, she would be finished. She had to get rid of these two thorns in her flesh before Grandpa Mu did. Mu Wanru applied her lip gloss in front of the mirror and smoothed it out. Then, she put the lip pencil into her bag. Suddenly, her expression changed. She lay in front of the counter and retched in pain. Blurg, Alan's expression changed. He immediately stepped forward and held her arm. He asked nervously, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing." Mu Wanru pushed him away. Before she could finish her sentence, she retched again. He felt nauseous, but he couldn't vomit anything out. He just felt inexplicably nauseous. It was extremely uncomfortable. Seeing her push him away, Alan's heart sank. Seeing her retching again, he hesitated for a moment before stepping forward to hold her shoulders. This time, perhaps because she was a little unsteady, Mu Wanru did not push him away. Seeing her back arched for a while, Alan frowned. "Is it a stomach problem?" "Probably." Mu Wanru raised her head and looked at the mirror. Her expression was ugly. "I'll go buy medicine for you." Chapter 496. "It's okay." Mu Wanru leaned on him weakly and stroked her chest. "I'm much better now. It's probably because I didn't eat breakfast, so why don't you take care of your body at all?" Alan caressed her face with heartache. Mu Wanru clutched her chest and continued to retch inexplicably. Powerlessly, she raised her eyes and caught a glimpse of a standing figure reflected in the mirror. Her back suddenly stiffened, and her expression changed. Then she pushed Ellen away. Ellen was still a little late, but when he saw her turn around with a pale face and stare straight ahead, he was shocked and followed her gaze and turned around. He saw Yun Xianxia standing stiffly at the entrance of the washroom, her eyes darting back and forth between the two of them. Mu Wanru? Why was she with this man? She had wanted to go to the bathroom to clean up the water stains on her body, but just as she walked to the door, she saw Mu Wanru and Alan snuggling intimately together. From her angle, she could see Alan's hand on her waist. What shocked her even more was her retching just now due to morning sickness. Perhaps Mu Wanru was inexperienced and didn't know what that reaction meant. However, she had been pregnant for 10 months. When she was pregnant with Yu and Xiao Yichen, her early pregnancy reaction was very serious. Therefore, she could tell at a glance that Mu Wanru's symptoms were similar to those of early pregnancy. Was she pregnant? Yun Xianxia was shocked by her own suspicions and felt a chill in her heart. How was that possible? She clearly remembered that Mu Wanru was congenitally infertile. She couldn't get pregnant. Back then, because she couldn't get pregnant, the Mu family hired a surrogate mother at a sky-high price to preserve the family line. But what was Mu Wanru's reaction just now if it wasn't a symptom of morning sickness? Yun Xianxia glanced at her face and saw that her gaze was weak and her complexion was terrible. Her heart sank. Could she really be pregnant? Mu Wanru saw her strange expression and frowned. At the same time, she felt guilty. When she thought about how this cheap woman was constantly threatening her position, a twisted hatred grew in her heart. She sneered and said coldly, "Bastard! Why do you keep staring at me?" Yun Xianxia ignored her hostile tone and said in a daze, "You two seem to be very close." A trace of panic flashed across Alan's face. He quickly took half a step back and immediately explained, "I just saw that young Madame Mu was not feeling well, so I went up to show my concern." Seeing him sizing up the situation, Mu Wanru felt her ears tingle when he called her young Madame Mu. She raised her head high and revealed a proper and elegant smile. So what if this bitch has the ability to seduce people? Now, she is the young mistress of the Mu family and Mu Yaji's fiancé. A woman like Yun Shirshir was just a casual toy Mu Yaja played with for a moment of interest. When he got tired of her, he would just throw her away. How could she not understand men? She would get rid of this thorn in her side sooner or later. It was just a fluke that she had escaped this time. Next time, she wouldn't be soft-hearted. Yun Shirshir faintly tugged at the corner of her lips and said, "Since you know that she is young Madame Mu, don't you think that your concern is a bit excessive?" Chapter 497. A hint of guilt flashed through Mu Wanru's eyes, but she quickly pretended to be calm. Then her gaze turned cold. She took a few steps forward and strode in front of her. She raised her hand high and slapped her face. Pa! Yun Shirshir couldn't dodge in time and her face was slapped to the side. A red and swollen mark immediately appeared on his face. Yun Shirshir's gaze froze. She caressed her burning cheek and stared at her in surprise. "Bitch! What are you looking at? Do you know what excessive means? I think you're the reincarnation of a vixen. You look pure and harmless, but you're born cheap." Mu Wanru gritted her teeth as she spoke. The anger and hatred in her eyes seemed to want to grind her bones into ashes. Yun Shirshir was angered by her explicit and unrestrained words, and her eyes revealed a sullen expression. "What right do you have to call me cheap? You still dare to talk back?" Mu Wanru said as she stretched out her hand to slap her again. Yun Shirshir, on the other hand, grabbed her wrist tightly and gave her a tight slap in return. Pa! Mu Wanru's slap caused her to lose her balance. She staggered back a few steps and almost fell. Alan quickly went forward and supported her body. He glared fiercely at Yun Shirshir. "What are you doing?" "She hit me first. This is for her." Yun Shirshir replied calmly, without a trace of fear on her face. Mu Wanru covered her red and swollen cheek. Her eyes were filled with tears of grievance as she glared at her. She really wanted to step forward and teach Yun Shirshir a lesson, but before she could take a step forward, her chest started to retch again. She tugged at her clothes and stopped in her tracks. Her eyes were fierce as she glared at Yun Shirshir. A cheap person is a cheap person. She was born cheap. Yun Shirshir was shocked when she heard this. There seemed to be a flash of white light in his mind. The scenes buried deep in her memory flashed before her eyes like a merry-go-round. In the fragmented memory fragments, a beautiful girl who looked like a proud little princess pushed her to the ground, pointed at her condescendingly and mocked, "B** teach will always be a B** teach, born to be a B** teach." Suddenly he had a splitting headache. It was as if something was breaking out of her head. She rubbed her throbbing forehead as she looked coldly at Mu Wanru's malevolent and distorted face. Her thoughts were in a whirl. 15 years ago, as far as she could remember, she had never seen her father when she was young. Her impression of her mother was that she was as beautiful as poison, arrogant, and elegant. She also had a younger brother. For as long as she could remember, the three of them depended on each other for survival. Although they were a little tight on money, she felt that those were the happiest times of her life. When she returned home, she had her mother and her younger brother. She loved to snuggle with her younger brother on the bed. Her mother would open a fairy tale book for them by the bedside and read it word by word in a gentle voice. In such a voice, they would fall into sweet dreams. But even this peace was ruthlessly broken when she was 9 years old. A car accident had sent the broken family into hell. In that car accident, if it wasn't for her mother's protection, she wouldn't have survived. And if it wasn't for her mother protecting her, her mother and younger brother wouldn't have lost their lives. Chapter 498. Not long after she struggled to climb out of the car and drag her brother out, the car was completely destroyed. Due to her severe injuries, she fainted. When she regained consciousness, she had minor injuries all over her body, and her brother was nowhere to be found. Her mother was eventually declared dead. Just before the death notice was issued, she held her injured arm and watched helplessly as her mother was pushed into the cold morgue. She followed along stiffly without crying or shedding a single tear. She seemed to have forgotten what tears tasted like. Her mother did not have many friends when she was alive, and her funeral was taken care of by kind-hearted people in society. After all, she did not have any relatives, and they pitied her, so the funeral was hastily arranged. After that, she was hospitalized for a whole month. She could not even remember how she survived. She dreamed in the middle of the night, and her heart was cold and desolate. It was only on the day of her discharge that she understood in her heart. From then on, she knew that she would be left alone. Other than a jade pendant, her mother did not leave her anything else. She remembered that her mother used to wear this jade pendant close to her body and never left it. As for her background, her mother never mentioned a word about it. As for her grandfather and father, she kept her mouth shut. However, she still remembered that the place her mother mentioned was the Hua family, a place she hated all her life. The person she mentioned was called Mu Sheng, the person she hated the most in her life. He was a cruel executioner. The number of times he mentioned the Mu family could be counted with one hand. As for her father, he never mentioned it. As she did not have any relatives, after a series of procedures, she was sent to a private welfare home. That place became her lifelong nightmare. Perhaps that memory was too dark, and she did not want to remember it. It was as if she had selective amnesia, and her memory of that place was no longer clear. Until Mu Wanru said, B*ST*RD will always be AB*ST*, road born to be AB*ST*RD. It made her recall that when she was young, there was once a girl who pointed at her and cursed her like this. When she first entered the welfare home, she was quickly assigned to her own dormitory. In the 20-square-meter room, 16 children were squeezed in. There were 8 beds and 2 floors. It was extremely crowded. There was a girl in the same dormitory with her. Everyone called her Xiao Rou. She was beautiful and generous. Like other children, she longed to be adopted by a rich family. She was different from other children. In his memory, she was always dressed up beautifully. She was beautiful and had many beautiful dresses. She always had a lot of candy and snacks. She was like a little princess who was doted on by thousands of people. She was the moon surrounded by stars, high and mighty. The director and teachers of the orphanage loved her very much. She even had a large group of fans among the children. She was like a little fairy. Everyone liked her and spoiled her. At that time, she still hadn't gotten over the pain of losing her mother. She was a little autistic and didn't like to talk, so other children didn't like to play with her. This girl was the first to talk to her. When she was lonely and helpless, she gave her a candy and said to her, "My name is Xiao Rou. What's your name? Let's be good friends." She thought that this girl was the little angel. She was kind and willing to help others.